Chapter 541. Needless to say, the demon god pillar Flawless this time was different from the one Wu Ming encountered in the Winterwood City. Not only was the shape and color more vigorous, but the attack power of the demon god pillar had also increased a lot. Because Flawless' target was Wu Ming, it did not disperse its attack. Instead, it deliberately gathered together to attack Wu Ming. Wu Ming naturally did not die in the first wave of attack, but he was slightly injured. Looking at the ground around the demon god pillar that was destroyed by the demon god mist and heat ray, Wu Ming's sense of danger towards Flawless increased by another level. The power of the heat ray emitted by the demon god pillar's eyes increased a lot. Anyway, it gave Wu Ming a sense of crisis. Although it was a little exaggerated, Wu Ming did rely on his skills and speed to avoid the heat ray. However, because it brushed past him several times, Wu Ming felt the intensity of the heat ray. Not only that, the dark purple demon mist was also a lot stronger. It could be said that if it were Elizabeth and the other servants, they would not be able to last more than 5 seconds in the demon mist. As for Sharon, who was restrained by poison, the demon mist with the poison attribute could even send Sharon back to the martyr's palace when it came in contact with him. Wu Ming had the noble armor, so his body was not hurt. However, the demon mist had the ability to ignore defense and corrode the spiritual base. A part of Wu Ming's spiritual base was directly corroded. As a result, Wu Ming repeatedly used his magic to release skills and rushed out of the area covered by the demon mist. The demon god pillar Flawless seemed to be deliberately playing with Wu Ming. After the first wave, it retracted the demon mist and did not attack again. How is it, Cylinder? This is the power that our king has bestowed upon us. The demon god pillar's eyes spun faster, and the demon mist was vaguely released again. It was not a precursor to an attack, but a sign of excitement and demonstration. After stretching his limbs, Wu Ming felt relieved when he sensed that Gadotsi, Sharon, and Elizabeth had retreated. His body was a servant's body that he created. Even if he died, it wouldn't matter. But Gadotsi wasn't like that. She was a complete human being. Seeing that Gadotsi and the others were covering the few rescued residents and retreating into the distance, Wu Ming once again used his mental power to search the ruins. Wu Ming heaved a sigh of relief after checking that there were no living beings. This way he wouldn't have to worry about his surroundings. Your power comes from the Holy Grail, right? Since the Holy Grail was created by the Magic King, it's not hard to guess that it's able to help you demon god pillars. Wu Ming did not feel dispirited because the demon god pillar Flawless temporarily gained the upper hand. Instead, he began to make inferences. Oh, that's true. But so what? Flawless believed in the power given by its king. It was not afraid of Wu Ming's pretending to be calm in its eyes. This is power. The power that can defeat you in this era. The demon god pillar roared. Countless heat rays and demon mist attacked again. The momentum was much stronger than before. After I kill you, I'll kill everyone in this era. Who cares about being the last master of mankind? I'll let Chaldea and the others meet their doom in despair. At that moment, Flawless was a little excited. However, this had nothing to do with Wu Ming. He continued to dodge. Wu Ming retreated 1,000 meters away. Indeed, this body doesn't have the ability to deal with you for the time being. Even if it was the legend of the Holy King, mythical Yggdrasil, its greatest power without charging could only injure the demon god pillar that had obtained the power of the Magic King. If he wanted to kill it, he would need to charge up for a long time. Of course, Flawless would not give Wu Ming the chance. That was why Wu Ming did not have the ability to deal with Flawless for the time being. But unfortunately, I've just become good friends with Rama. Wu Ming smiled at Flawless. However, this smile made Flawless feel uneasy. Although Flawless was not afraid of Wu Ming, he did not think that Wu Ming was bluffing. What if he really had a way to deal with him? With this thought, Flawless increased the amount of magic output. In an instant, the countless eyes on the demon god pillar began to bleed. The amount of magic output exceeded the demon god pillar's tolerance and hurt itself instead. However, the result was a dark ball of light that was comparable to the power of dozens of holy swords appearing in front of the demon god pillar. Wu Ming could feel that if the dark ball of light exploded or formed into a light cannon, the power would definitely be able to blow up a huge hole in the American continent. It could even be said that it would not be difficult to create a new lake. It could be said that if Wu Ming did not activate his noble artifact, Arthur's Gift, he would have been forced to leave the stage after being injured by this attack. As Flawless, who had been observing Wu Ming ever since he came to this singularity, he naturally knew that Wu Ming had such a noble phantasm. However, he knew that Wu Ming's noble phantasm was not like the legendary Avalon that could form an invincible domain. Wu Ming's noble phantasm was only an invincible shield. In that case he only needed to go around the invincible shield. As Flawless, who had accepted the power of his king, he naturally had such a method. No matter if it was using the space vault or forcefully turning the light cannon, Flawless could do it. At that moment, Wu Ming moved according to Flawless' prediction. The armor on Wu Ming's body instantly disintegrated. Without a doubt, Wu Ming was ready to use this invincible shield. However, the next scene made Flawless think that Wu Ming was crazy. After the armor disintegrated, the various parts quickly flew around the Demon God Pillar, surrounding the Demon God Pillar and Wu Ming. Then, every armor part began to connect with each other. A seemingly transparent but incomparable light film appeared, wrapping Wu Ming and the Demon God Pillar Flawless, leaving only the sky. After all, the height of the Demon God Pillar could be said to be so high that one could not see the end. To be more specific, at that moment, an incomparable square barrier with no top covered each of them. It was the kind of invincible light barrier that would not affect the outside world because the aftermath would reach the sky. If the power was really strong, it could directly break through the atmosphere. There was only one word to describe it, and that was Trapped Beast Deathmatch. I see. Looks like you want to die together with me, Flawless said mockingly. In such a confined space, no matter if Flawless's dark light ball exploded or acted as a light cannon, the end result would be him being injured or even killed. Even with the top as a vent, no, it should be because of this vent that the aftermath of the damage would spread to the Demon God Pillar that reached the sky. Wu Ming smiled. Then I'm sorry. You think too much. Then Wu Ming waved one hand and a few weapons appeared behind Wu Ming. I just don't want my attack to hurt Tachika. Chapter 542. At that moment, Wu Ming looked like Gilgamesh, who was using the Gate of Babylon. However, the only difference was that the 5 armies were not lined up side by side behind Wu Ming. Dozens of glowing weapons floated around Wu Ming like stars surrounding the moon, wrapping around Wu Ming. There were many types of weapons such as discs, javelins, long sticks, short sticks, trident spears, giant swords, whiplocks, giant hammers, bows and arrows, and so on. Wu Ming waved his hands, and the weapons around him seemed to be pulled as they rotated slowly. Flawless, on the other hand, began to guard against Wu Ming's meaningless attack. What do you mean? Demon God Pillar Flawless's voice sounded a little frightened. Although it was not afraid of Wu Ming's tricks, it had no choice as the sun's incarnation had scared it. After all, the sun was not a trick, but a killer move that could be fatal. In the big hole in Winterwood City, Wu Ming's son made Flawless suffer. In the end, Flawless's body could not take it anymore, so Lev came out to replace it. In the end, Lev was also tortured by Wu Ming's flame until he fainted. After all, Wu Ming's sun incarnation was an inextinguishable flame. Almost nothing could extinguish the sun incarnation that Wu Ming used. You're just bluffing. Don't try to scare me. Flawless roared. Its eyes bulged slightly and the dark light ball in front of it doubled in size. Although that was what it said to make Flawless so angry, it was obvious that it had been suppressed. Wu Ming could see through its trick of using anger to cover up its fear. To put it simply, Flawless was actually deceiving itself. Indeed, this body does not have the ability to deal with you, but don't forget about the Holy Grail. As he said that, Wu Ming took out the Holy Grail that he had obtained in Denver from his precious artifact space. Difficult. Flawless recalled the fear of being dominated by the sun. Through the connection between the Demon God Pillars and his own intelligence, ability, Flawless naturally knew how Demon God Shutting, who had fused with the Demon God Pillar, died. The sun. With the blessing of the Sun God given by Wu Ming through Tamamonome and the Holy Grail as a medium, Wu Ming successfully summoned the Sun Incarnation. As if expelling all darkness, the incomparably dazzling sunlight illuminated the earth, and the world fell into white. This was the last scene that Flawless saw, through Demon God Shutting's perspective. Then it was like a broken string and nothing else could be seen. Flawless was very sure that it was the sun that had once ravaged him, but fortunately, it seemed that this move could only be used once. The blessing of the Sun God had been completely used up. Since then, I have been paying attention to you. You didn't receive the blessing of the Sun God at all. Flawless roared. The funny thing was that he could have released his sure-kill dark light ball directly. While Wu Ming was still talking to Flawless, he could have killed Wu Ming. However, Flawless was already terrified. Looking weak on the outside was not scary, but the pain in his heart was fatal. I'm not going to use that move. Just as you said, I don't have the blessing of the Sun God as a medium anymore. Wu Ming smiled and shook his head. However, Wu Ming's smile was incomparably terrifying in Flawless' eyes. Ah! With a roar, the dark light ball in front of the demon god pillar exploded instantly, forming a huge dark light beam that swept towards Wuming. However, facing Floro's light beam, Wuming was not nervous at all. "Didn't you say that I was scaring you? Then whether I'm scaring you or not, it's up to you to try it yourself, Floros." As he spoke, the weapons that were emitting golden light around Wuming instantly gathered together and integrated into the holy grail that Wuming was holding. Swoosh, dong. The huge light beam instantly covered Wuming, but the light beam did not stop. Instead, it exploded towards the back and instantly hit the defensive light wall formed by Wuming's noble artifact. There was a huge collision sound. At this moment, a light beam that was extremely small compared to the light beam shot out from the demon god pillar and soared into the sky. Then the light beam slashed from top to bottom, quickly and fiercely, and Floro's light beam was split apart. After the light beam disappeared, Wuming's figure appeared. Not only was he unscathed, but the holy grail in his hand was also gone. Instead, there was a holy sword that was similar to the Sword of Victory, but more elegant and powerful. What? Floros was horrified. It could not accept and was not willing to accept this result. That's the power of our king. How could you dissolve it so easily? Floros could no longer calm down. That sword, where did it come from? As if all eyes were about to pop out, countless eyes looked at the holy sword in Wuming's hand. "I don't need to say anything more to you, Floros." As he spoke, Wuming raised the holy sword in his hand and injected magical power into it. The holy sword erupted with holy thunder and unprecedented light. It was an ultimate power that seemed to be able to split a star. Even the invincible light film formed by the armor could not completely block such power because it was not a damage. Just like that, the power that could split a star seeped outside. In an instant, the ground of the singularity let out a sorrowful cry and the sky was shrouded by dark clouds. Gadatsi, who felt uneasy, did not want to leave no matter what. She insisted on waiting not far away. She was waiting for the disaster to end or waiting for the disaster to come. Inside the invincible light film formed by the armor. Damn the dragon of origin. Floros seemed to have known his ending. He was not willing to accept his end and launched an attack. Compared to the beginning, the number and quality of tentacles were one step higher. The heat ray that was comparable to the holy sword and the demon mist that was so dark that it made people tremble were all attacking Wuming. The price that Floros paid for releasing these super powerful attacks was that the entire body of the demon god pillar had shrunk by at least 3 times. At that moment, the demon god pillar was like a bamboo pole that was about to die. However, Wuming did not care about it at all. Before these attacks arrived, Wuming only slashed in the direction of Floros. In an instant, the power that could split a star turned into a light beam that was even bigger than the one released by the demon god pillar. Looking at this power that could definitely destroy Gaia, Floros finally understood why Wuming used the invincible defense to trap them one by one. It was not that he wanted to use the power of the demon god pillar to perish together, but Wuming was afraid of hurting this land, this singularity. Floros had no doubt that Wuming's move could directly break this singularity. Then Floros did not know what happened. Because the power of the holy sword that could split a star had already covered it. In the outside world, Gadatsi's face was gloomy. Behind her stood a group of followers. Everyone looked nervously at the transparent barrier not far away that was covered in white. Ka Rong raised his head and looked at the light beam that had already rushed out of the sky. He felt the magic power that could break the barrier and let out a sigh of relief. It seems that he is hiding an unimaginable identity. Chapter 543. The reason why Sharon was relieved was because the beam of light was gradually weakening. Because if the intensity just now continued, Sharon believed that this singularity would probably explode. If there was space, the energy would rush out of the atmosphere and enter space. But unfortunately, there was no space here. After all, this was a singularity that was out of human nature. In other words, this was actually an independent subspace. And subspace, there was no universe. In fact, it was because Wuming finally thought of this that he gradually weakened the beam of light. Not to mention the servants, Gadatsi and Matthew were doomed. Did they really think that the power of time and space was illusory? As mentioned before, if Wuming didn't have the Dragon of Origin's racial talent of time and space, he wouldn't dare to travel through time and space at will. Gem Wuming also relied on the records of his existence in each world, and combined with the second law to be able to travel through parallel worlds. And like Rick's world and the world of the God Slayer, there were no records of Gem Wuming's existence. This was also one of the reasons why Gem Wuming couldn't come to other worlds and could only travel through parallel worlds. Back to the main topic. After Wu Ming destroyed the demon god pillar, the invincible light wall around him automatically disintegrated and turned back into armor on Wu Ming's body. The sky and the earth also returned to their original state, and the mournful cry disappeared. And the place that was originally covered by the invincible light film was now 3 feet underground. It couldn't be helped, Wu Ming's beam of light didn't only extend upward, but also underground. It could be said that if Wu Ming didn't deliberately leave the sky and didn't create a sealed space, the earth would have been penetrated by now. Of course, the result of this singularity was the destruction of the singularity. He didn't care about the hole in the earth that he created. After all, the singularity would automatically repair the place that was different from the original work. Regarding the singularity's automatic repair of everything that happened in the singularity, Wu Ming actually knew about that drawback. Those who were killed by servants would not be resurrected after the singularity was restored. Instead, after the singularity was restored, the world would modify them to be killed by bandits. After all, a person's life and death wasn't something that a mere world could casually interfere with. Or rather, in the eyes of the world, those who were killed were already dead. The only thing that was fixed was the process of being killed. The result wouldn't change. Wu Ming guessed that Gadotsi and the others still didn't know about this. Wu Ming didn't think that Roman would be so heartless to tell them this fact. It was a sad story. Immediately after, Wu Ming discovered Gadotsi and the others not far away. Wu Ming flew towards Gadotsi and the others. Assassin! Gadotsi rushed into Wu Ming's arms and hugged Wu Ming's neck with tears in her eyes. Wu Ming was so scared that he could only let go of the holy sword in his hand and let it float beside Wu Ming, while Wu Ming's hands hugged Gadotsi. Ah! Wu Ming gently patted the little girl's back. He was a little confused for a moment. What's going on? At this time, Karen stood up. Master, she has been worried about you and she doesn't want to leave. Karen laughed helplessly. In fact, when Gadotsi wanted to stay in the beginning, Sharon was opposed to it. After all, even if all their servants died here, they couldn't let Gadotsi get hurt. Just as Karen was about to take Gadotsi away, Matthew took the lead and stood up. I believe in Senpai and I also believe in Senpai. Karen was stunned by that pair of noble and flawless eyes. Then, more servants voted, and the result was that they basically stood on Gadotsi's side. I don't think my friend will lose. I've even lent him all my weapons. It was not easy for me to defeat Hector again. I did not come here to escape. The Apache gods will protect him. I was ordered by that man to protect Tachika. Even if I am a hunter, I will not go back on my words. My husband will be fine, Migu. It was him who woke me up from being influenced by the president's power. I will support him. These were the thoughts of the servants who directly chose to stay, but the servants who indirectly chose to stay were more strange. Shalu will stay, I will stay too. Anjin-sama will stay, I will stay too. Edison-sama is also enlightened, in that case I will stay too. Demon God Pillar is a virus. It needs to be eliminated. Ah, so troublesome, I have to stay too. Well, I will accompany the ladies. Of course, there were a lot of strange reasons, but it could be said that except for Karen, all the servants directly or indirectly chose to stay with Gadotsi. But what could Karen do? He could not beat up these servants who protected Gadotsi and take away Gadotsi, so he could only stay together. Although he did not believe in Wu Ming, but as the wise one in the team, he always had to consider the safety of the general. In that case, let's wait here together. In the end, Karen also cast his almost useless vote. Thinking of the vote just now, Karen felt powerless. In short, Senpai is very worried about Senpai. Matthew looked at Gadotsi in Wu Ming's arms. At this moment, she felt that her Senpai was an ordinary little girl. Wu Ming could only smile helplessly. Then Wu Ming patted Gadotsi's little head. Have you forgotten that I'm not dead? Even if this spirit base is gone, my body is still intact. However, Gadotsi raised her head from Wu Ming's arms and looked at Wu Ming with tears in her eyes. But I am just worried about you. This scene made Kyoheim and Tamamonome show signs of anger, but they were held down by Elizabeth, Helena, and others. You little girl, Wu Ming didn't know what to say and could only pinch Gadotsi's little nose. Hee, just like the weather in June, Gadotsi's tearful face instantly turned into a smiling face. Holding Gadotsi like this, Wu Ming began to ask about business. By the way, how far did you push Rome's forces? How did they summon the demon god pillar directly? Let me answer this question. At this time a weak voice came. It was no doubt Roman. Roman? Has Chaldea replied already? That's fast. Wu Ming complained. How can it not be fast? Da Vinci is exhausted. At this time, Olga Marie's figure was suddenly projected on the side. Chapter 544. Hey. Isn't this Olga? Long time no see, Wu Ming warmly greeted Olga Marie. Wu Ming also vaguely saw the poor Roman who was knocked to the ground. Hey? Director, you finally came out. Gadotsi was surprised by Olga Marie's appearance. How long have you been in your room? You don't even have a sense of presence. Wu Ming complained in his heart. While Wu Ming and Gadotsi were warmly greeting each other, Olga Marie was blushing at the moment. Of course, the blushing was not caused by the greeting between the two. You two guys. How long do you want to hug me? At this time, Wu Ming realized that he was still hugging Gadotsi. If you didn't say it, I would have forgotten. And Gadotsi also just realized this problem, unhurriedly got down from Wu Ming's arms. Although the two seemed to be very close, in fact, the relationship between Wu Ming and Gadotsi was not like what Olga Marie thought. Gadotsi has always regarded Wu Ming as a reliable person like a brother, not a lover's attachment, and Wu Ming only regarded Gadotsi as a sister, the kind that was quite doting. In fact, neither Wu Ming nor Gadotsi realized that since they met, the affection between the two sides was getting deeper and deeper, and this affection was not love or friendship, but kinship and so on. What's wrong with a brother and sister hugging? However, this was not the case for Olga Marie, who didn't know very much. In her eyes, it was just a matter of her subordinate hooking up with her personal servant. You are my servant, don't casually contact other masters. Olga Marie said angrily. However, it seemed that the only other master was Gadotsi. Yes, my master. Olga Marie, then, can you tell me what happened? Olga Marie's face was red, and then she began to tell her story. After all, it was not a long story. Olga Marie only spent about 2 minutes to finish it. After Gadotsi and the others met up with Edison, they came here and launched an attack on the Roman side. Of course, after all, it was to cover the action of Wu Ming and others. The servants only made a little move, basically relying on Edison's mechanical infantry to fight with Rome's soldiers. However, they didn't see any Roman servants, and the mechanical infantry with the help of the servants naturally defeated the Rome soldiers. In the end, they found that there were almost no Roman soldiers coming out of the city. Everyone stopped and began to discuss. Some people proposed to directly enter the city to retrieve the Holy Grail, but more people thought Wu Ming's plan, including Gadotsi. After all, Gadotsi knew that she could use the Holy Grail to summon the demon god Pillar, so she was more worried that Rome would directly summon the demon god Pillar if he was forced into a corner. After this news was told to everyone, those who proposed to directly attack the city were silent. By the way, Olga Marie also supported the attack. When she talked about this matter, her face was red. After all, the demon's pillar was not a joke. If it appeared now, the servants would not be able to stop it. Olga Marie was not here, but Gadotsi was in danger. Just when everyone was ready to retreat, the demon's pillar suddenly appeared in the city and began to destroy the people and things around it. And for some reason, the demon's pillar was like a joke, passively led by everyone. But this was also good. In this way, Gadotsi and others could go and search for survivors. However, from the tentacles that attacked Gadotsi and others, it could be seen that the demon's pillar was indeed playing, it was waiting. And after Wu Ming's arrival, the demon's pillar no longer paid attention to other people's reactions. That person was most likely Wu Ming. Fortunately, the demon's pillar and Wu Ming's conversation was communicated through a special magic transmission. After all, if the demon's pillar really spoke by itself with its size, the sound was enough to be heard by all the servants here. Although Floros was a demon's pillar, it was not a guy who was willing to let others listen to it. Otherwise, it would have already spoken. Why wait until Wu Ming's arrival to talk to Wu Ming? And Wu Ming, who thought of Floros, looked at Matthew. Matthew. Wu Ming looked at Matthew with some hesitation. Senior, do you have anything else? Matthew looked at Wu Ming. Although it was Wu Ming who spoke first, Wu Ming was silent. Shaking his head, Wu Ming decided to speak. Floros, or Lev is a little obsessed with you. Wu Ming's words not only made Matthew stunned, but even the surrounding servants and Gadotsi were puzzled. Wu Ming used his mental power to see Floros' behavior that could be said to be targeting Matthew, coupled with the other party's anger towards Chaldea, and Matthew's identity as a test tube baby. Wu Ming could almost guess something. Although no one mentioned Matthew's identity as a test tube baby, Wu Ming's eyesight could still see that Matthew was a little different. Nothing, I'm just guessing, don't mind it. Wu Ming immediately laughed and shook his head. This caused everyone to be confused. But Matthew was thinking about something. It seemed that she had some feelings in her heart. In order to avoid an awkward silence, Achilles spoke. To be able to get rid of that special demon god pillar, you really are the one who forced me to a dead end, Sodric. Achilles laughed like a bandit and put his arm around Wu Ming's shoulder. Just now when Wu Ming and the demon god pillar Floros were fighting, Achilles, who defeated Hector, drove his chariot over. However, looking at the injury on his heel, history had probably repeated itself, and Hector had broken his immortality. However, Hector once again repeated history and left the arena after a one-on-one fight with Achilles. Oh no. After being reminded by Achilles, Wu Ming suddenly thought of something. What's wrong? Gadotsi looked at Wu Ming. At this time Roman's weak voice came. That. Your holy grail hasn't been recovered yet. Everyone was silent. It seemed to be true, because everyone ignored this matter because of the interaction between Wu Ming and Gadotsi, and Wu Ming just happened to see Gadotsi when he was putting away the armor, and flew down before he had time to recover it. I'll go retrieve it now. Wu Ming smiled awkwardly and prepared to fly over. But unfortunately, the place where the demon god pillar was previously located, which was the current huge pit, suddenly erupted with a pillar of magic energy that soared to the sky. Ugh. Wu Ming covered his head with a headache. This was great, this was bad. Chapter 545. Wu Ming told Sharon and others to take Gadotsi to the distance. Some of the servants knew that they were not strong, so they spontaneously acted as Gadotsi's guards. There were some who were forced to stay by Gadotsi's side, such as Nightingale. As for the willful Xiao Yu who wanted to go with Wu Ming, she was dismissed by Wu Ming's words, "A virtuous wife must first be obedient." The remaining servants followed Wu Ming to the giant pit to see the situation. Achilles was driving the chariot and Wu Ming, Rama and Sharon were standing on the chariot. Only Atlanta was not weak, but she did not follow them. Wu Ming said half-jokingly, "We men are enough. Tachika will be taken care of by you women." These words made Robin Hood and Billy Boy blush with shame. But Geronimo did not care about these things. So Wu Ming, Sharon, and Rama, along with Achilles, sat on his chariot and flew to the center of the giant pit to see the situation. The giant magic pillar that was visible to the naked eye just now was completely gone at this moment. Because of this, they dared to come to the center to see the situation. The reason was quite simple. Being able to withstand fire damage did not mean that they had to bear it when the fire was burning. They could wait for the fire to extinguish before taking action. Wu Ming and others also saw that the magic pillar disappeared and rushed over. However, the disappearance of the magic pillar did not mean that the magic in the giant pit disappeared. Wu Ming and the others could clearly feel the huge source of mana below them. They were certain that the owner of that mana was below them. But because there were still residual magic and dust, and the magic source at the bottom of the giant pit was constantly emitting magic, coupled with the darkness in the pit, everyone could hardly see the bottom. Sharon began to use clairvoyance to carefully look below, but the magic in the giant pit blocked Karen's clairvoyance, so he could not see clearly. This is bad. The other party is at least as strong as Achilles or even stronger. We can't go down rashly. Although Karen's words made Achilles very unhappy, they were the truth. Achilles could only smack his lips. Rama also frowned. That magic power makes me feel uneasy. It's a feeling of being restrained. Wu Ming's face, on the other hand, did not change in the slightest. Looking at the dark crater below, Wu Ming sensed a familiar power. The master of that power was the servant that Wu Ming had seen before, the destroyer of civilization, Attila, the Hun king. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, it made sense. The other party's noble phantasm was the divine sword of the Roman god of war. It was not strange for him to be related to the Roman forces. Seems like it's an old rival. Achilles, Sharon, Rama, wait for me here. I'll go down myself. The three of them looked at Wu Ming with surprise, but considering Wu Ming's current state, they calmed down. The armor that originally separated from his body was once again attached to his body, leaving only his head exposed. Wu Ming's magic power constantly circulated on the armor, making it look even more holy. Similarly, Wu Ming's holy sword, Divine Blade of Salvation, was once again held in Wu Ming's hand. Pure magic power was also circulating on the sword. Just one strike was enough to make the demon god pillar retreat. The lightning and radiance of this holy sword left an incomparably deep impression on Sharon and the others. It could be said that if Wu Ming said that he could defeat the servant in the giant pit, Sharon and the others would not think that Wu Ming was lying. It could not be helped, the Divine Blade of Salvation was just that powerful. I really did not expect my friend to have such a deep connection with me. My noble phantasm actually drew out your noble phantasm. Rama's face revealed a strange expression. The various types of weapons that were floating around Wuming were actually Rama's rarely used noble phantasm, Vishunbuja. It was a noble phantasm that had once received the legendary materialization of the holy god's weapon. It then formed the appearance of Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon. Of course, unlike Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon, Rama's weapon did not exceed 50 pieces. It was not realistic to want to use it as a cannon. Moreover, just penetrating Brahmastra was enough for Rama, which was why Rama rarely used this noble phantasm. When he walked out of Demetrius's portal, Wuming borrowed this rarely used noble phantasm from Rama. This was because Wuming needed an insurance that could defeat everything. Since the Sun God's blessing and the Holy Grail could draw out one of Wuming's noble phantasm, the Sun Incarnation, it was not impossible to use the Vishunbuja and the Holy Grail to draw out the Divine Blade of Salvation. After all, the Divine Blade of Salvation was the Manchala formation that the gods created for Rama, the last king. Although Rama in this world was not given almost all weapons by the gods, he had a weapon that was given by the Holy God. It could be said that Rama's Vishunbuja was the Divine Blade of Salvation of the God-Slayer world on the other side of the Shape Moon world. Although the difference in power between the two was not small, it was not a problem to use the Vishunbuja as a holy relic to summon the Divine Blade of Salvation that Wuming inherited from the last king. Rama, if it's you, you should be able to feel the power inside, right? As he spoke, Wuming placed the Divine Blade of Salvation in front of his chest. Rama nodded. Because of the connection, Rama could clearly see the Manchala formation in the Divine Blade of Salvation, as well as the endless number of weapons. It was also because of this that Rama took the opportunity to understand some of Wuming's information that outsiders did not know. Although he could not understand most of the information like Stheno and Tamamonome, Rama still understood a lot. Currently, Rama only knew that Wuming defeated the last king Rama in the alternate world and inherited the last king's position to obtain the Divine Blade of Salvation. Although Rama's expression was a little strange after knowing that he was in the alternate world and not a parallel world. After all, his alternate world self was indeed a little strange. If that's the case, then I won't say anything more. Sharon gave up on nagging. He could only say that he was used to nagging as a teacher. Although I'm not happy if we follow him down, we might become a burden. Achilles was being frank for once. Don't worry, I'll take care of the enemy. With a confident smile, Wuming closed his helmet. His dragon horns emitted a holy cold light under the sun. With a light leap, Wuming flipped over and turned into a silver ray of light, falling into the bottomless pit. Chapter 546. In the giant pit, Wuming felt as if he had fallen into an abyss. Darkness without light shrouded him. That's strange. Wuming used his mental power to examine the unfathomable bottom and frowned in thought. With Wuming's flying speed, he should have reached the core of the earth by now. Besides, Wuming speculated that the giant pit was not that deep. This was almost a small world of its own. Could it be an inherent enchantment? Wuming thought as his magical power surged onto the blade of the Divine Blade of Salvation. The Divine Blade of Salvation was still capable of breaking through with brute force. Just then, a ray of light lit up from the bottom of the abyss. The dazzling light instantly covered Wuming. Wuming subconsciously closed his eyes. Then Wuming felt his feet touching the ground. Wuming opened his eyes and found that everything in front of him had changed. Grassland? After a moment of surprise, Wuming quickly calmed down. Wuming was now standing on a vast grassland. Feeling the breeze brushing his cheeks, the fragrance of the grass at his feet, and the narrow magical power space, Wuming was almost certain that this was an inherent enchantment. After removing the restrictions of the helmet, Wuming's short hair swayed with the breeze. Wuming took 2 steps forward, came to a small mound, and began to investigate. Unfortunately, even so, there was still an endless grassland around and in the distance. Just then, the sound of horse hooves suddenly came from afar. Wuming looked at the black dot in the distance that gradually grew bigger, and his eyes condensed magical power. He saw that the black dot that was gradually approaching was a dark-skinned girl riding a horse. It was the Hun king that Wuming fought, the war god girl Attila. Although the girl was expressionless, Wuming could see a trace of joy in the girl's eyes. She was enjoying the joy of galloping on the prairie, just like a true child of the prairie. Very soon, Attila approached Wuming on her fine horse. Then, as if she couldn't see Wuming, she galloped past Wuming. Wuming looked suspiciously at Attila, who had already left behind him. Then he squatted down and grabbed a handful of green grass. So that's how it is. Wuming stood up and turned to look at the girl who was leaving. He suddenly understood. This place was not purely an inherent barrier. As everyone knew, the inherent enchantment was the manifestation of one's mind, and it was used to influence the world. At this moment, even though the grassland here was also considered a physical object, to be more specific, it was an incomparably clear illusion. Wu-Ming looked at the grass in his hand. The grass had already disappeared like smoke. A scene between a soul image and an inherent barrier. Then, it shouldn't be an inherent barrier that Attila released on her own initiative, right? Looking at Attila, who was gradually turning into a black dot, Wu-Ming pondered. This is probably Attila's memories from when she was a Hun. Wu-Ming guessed correctly. Just like how servants and masters would dream of each other's experiences, this was Attila's dream. Originally, because Attila was too dangerous, Romulus used the Holy Grail to seal Attila. Because she was sealed by the Holy Grail, Attila had always been in a state of unconsciousness and dreaming. Because the demon god pillar was destroyed, and the Holy Grail was not taken away, Attila relied on the Holy Grail to continue dreaming. After all, Attila was also affected, which was why she was in a state of half-awake. The previous demon god pillar had erupted because of this. Of course, Wu-Ming naturally didn't know about this. Wu-Ming guessed that Attila was used as a sacrifice to summon the demon god pillar. Then, after the demon god pillar was destroyed, Attila had this incomplete dream because of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail made this dream incomplete, and Wu-Ming happened to intrude, seeing the scene of the girl galloping on the grassland. No matter what the reason was, Attila didn't come out of the huge pit because of the dream, but instead stayed in the huge pit. But at this time, the surrounding environment suddenly began to change. As if it was distorted, except for Wu-Ming himself, the space was in chaos. Wu-Ming didn't feel any danger, so he didn't move, calmly waiting. Immediately, the space began to recover, but looking at the color, it shouldn't be a grassland anymore. This time, Wu-Ming's surroundings turned into a narrow stone room. This narrowness was naturally not from his perspective, but from the girl who occupied most of the space in this stone room. The huge white-haired girl was lying on a stone bed in the middle of the stone room, with a smile on her face as she fell into a deep sleep. Although the stone room was narrow, it was just enough for this giant girl to sleep, so it didn't seem too crowded. Thus, Wu-Ming had enough space to stand. The smiling giant girl sleeping was Attila. Wu-Ming, on the other hand, didn't have any thoughts of Attila. That three-nothingness actually knows how to smile. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this enormous Attila wasn't the girl who had galloped on the grassland just now. The two were definitely related, just like how Wu-Ming used his dependence to create a clone. But a clone was a clone and couldn't become Wu-Ming's main body. Wu-Ming felt that the giant girl in front of him and Attila the Hun had a relationship similar to that of a main body and a clone. At this time, the eyelids of the giant girl lying on the stone bed moved. In the next second, the girl opened her eyes. The giant girl sat up slowly, showing a sitting posture of a young girl. Wu-Ming and the giant girl didn't speak. Both of them stared at each other calmly. However, Wu-Ming saw joy in the giant girl's eyes. Wu-Ming could see that it was the joy of someone finally came, or no longer alone. In this way, Wu-Ming would be able to know a little. Even if the giant girl had been sleeping in this stone room for a long time, "If you don't say anything, I'm going to leave," Wu-Ming suddenly said. Wait a minute?" The giant girl's gentle voice came as if she was afraid of scaring Wu-Ming. But even so, Wu-Ming could hear the anxiety and worry in the girl's voice. Wu-Ming smiled. "Don't worry, I'm just kidding." After hearing Wu-Ming's words, the giant girl breathed a sigh of relief. Then, as if she had been enlightened, the giant girl realized that she had been fooled. She looked at Wu-Ming with her small face if she had a normal body shape. However, Wu-Ming still didn't see anger, resentment, or any other negative emotions in her eyes. Her eyes were still filled with joy and surprise. Sorry, I apologize. It's my fault." Wu-Ming smiled and apologized to the giant girl. "It's nothing. Actually, as the master, I should have spoken first." As if she thought of something, the giant girl lowered her head and stopped looking at Wu-Ming. There was a trace of fear in her eyes. It was nothing else but the fear that others might be afraid of her. Wu-Ming's eyes flashed with a glimmer of light, then he smiled. "Who do you think I am? Something that can make me afraid hasn't been born yet." Then, under the giant girl's surprised gaze, Wu-Ming walked to the giant girl's lap and sat down cross-legged. Chapter 547. The giant girl was quite surprised by Wu-Ming's bold behavior, but she didn't chase away Wu-Ming, who was sitting on her lap. Instead, she lowered her head and talked to Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming told Attila his name, and Attila also told her name. However, Wu-Ming was quite familiar with this girl. At least he knew her name long ago. Because Wu-Ming had seen this giant girl in the origin of the M-shaped moon world. The Star Scout, the destroyer of civilization, the giant god Attila. This explained why Wu-Ming said to Attila to dream peacefully back in Winterwood City. But Wu-Ming always felt that the name Attila wasn't her real name. After all, this name was the same as the Hun King. Or was the Hun King's name based on Attila's name? Both are possible. But it didn't matter. A name was just a code name. Wu-Ming had many names such as Vilo, Sodlek, Hyunryong, and Selander. Although there was a name that wasn't really a name. If it weren't for the fact that Wu-Ming was his original name, Wu-Ming wouldn't have chosen this name as his real name. After all, to the root of origins dragons, names and whatnot meant nothing. Just like that, Wu-Ming and Attila chatted like a pair of close friends. They got a lot of information from Wu-Ming, or rather, it was Attila who took the initiative to tell Wu-Ming. After all, although Wu-Ming had once soaked in the origin of the M-shaped moon world, Wu-Ming didn't use the origin to investigate the information of the M-shaped moon world. Naturally, he wasn't very clear about Attila's situation. This stone room was actually the control room of a spaceship in the core of the moon. Attila's stone bed was the control panel, and Attila herself was the control lever. However, she couldn't activate the spaceship because she was trapped in this place. Although Attila didn't care much about her personal freedom, she still couldn't activate the spaceship. As for why Wu-Ming was here, it was because of Attila. Attila was actually an avatar of Attila on Earth. Under normal circumstances, if Attila fell asleep, he would be dreaming of Attila or dreaming of other dreams. By the way, do you remember the last time we met in Winterwood City? Wu-Ming asked curiously. Of course I remember. After all, that was the first time someone cared about me. Attila said with a happy smile on his face. Attila's reply stunned Wu-Ming. Just a simple conversation triggered by knowing a little about Attila's situation made Attila so happy that someone cared about her. How lonely would she have to be to say something like that? That was 14,000 years of loneliness. How did Attila, who had gained sentient personality, endure it? It was just a dream. Apart from the few times when he dreamt of Attila the heroic spirit, he dreamt more of what Wu-Ming saw just now. Galloping freely on the endless grassland without restraint, without harm. Feeling a slightly sad atmosphere in the stone room, Attila quickly changed the topic and began to talk about Attila's singularity in the United States. Because the Magic King sent a new Holy Grail, along with Romulus-linked summoning, many servants who were more or less related to Rome were summoned. Including Attila, the Hun who held the war god sword of Mars. And because of Attila's reluctance to destroy and Romulus's fear, before she was fully summoned, she was detected by Romulus and sealed with the Holy Grail. Of course, if Attila resisted, she could have broken free at the beginning of the seal, but Attila, or Attila's heart, didn't want to destroy it. Attila's identity was an alien cosmic destruction weapon that destroyed planets. She was originally emotionless. But because Attila would absorb the technology, knowledge, and civilization of the destroyed planets, the result was that she became quite gentle, tolerant, and pure. Obviously, the civilization of the last planet that Attila destroyed must be an intellectual system full of motherhood and love. In the beginning of the conversation with Attila, Wu-Ming felt that Attila was a lively girl full of excitement. But after chatting for a long time, Wu-Ming felt that Attila was a gentle woman full of motherhood and the calmness and tolerance of an elder. It felt like she had multiple personalities. In fact, Wu-Ming's guess was not wrong. According to Attila herself, she had 3 personalities, but these 3 personalities were not mixed. Instead, they were clearly independent of each other. At the beginning, there was the side of a young girl, the side of an intellectual, motherly, and tolerant goddess, and the side of a follower or heroic spirit, Attila, a cold and fearsome warrior side. This was why Wu-Ming could immediately feel that Attila had multiple personalities. Attila's personalities were clearly separated and were relatively easy to distinguish. It could be said that Attila the giant had the calmness and tolerance of an elder, the illusory and loneliness of a lonely position, and the calmness and coldness of an invader. However, these personalities would change according to the people or things that she faced. Just like Attila, who was frightened at the beginning, that was the delicate and cute side of a young girl. After interacting with Wu-Ming for a while, Attila showed the motherly, intellectual, gentle, and tolerant side of a goddess. As for the warrior side of Attila, it would basically no longer appear in her original body. It would only appear in Attila as a heroic spirit. Afterwards, Wu-Ming asked how he came here. Actually, I pulled your spiritual body here, Attila said with some embarrassment. Her current shy appearance should be that of a young girl. According to Attila, when Attila was sealed by the Holy Grail and brought into the demon god Pillar's body, the seal was still stable. Attila used Attila's identity to dream of galloping on the grasslands. Afterwards, when Wuming got rid of the demon god pillar, the powerful force destroyed part of the Holy Grail's seal on Attila. As a result, it created a strange area under the huge crater that was neither an environment nor an inherent barrier. It was in between the two. And Wuming just happened to enter Attila's dream. Attila was indeed unable to discover Wuming's existence, but Attila did. Therefore, Attila directly used the Holy Grail and that special area to pull Wuming's spiritual body to the spaceship in the center of the moon. According to Attila, it was like this. Because Wuming, you have been releasing your spiritual power roughly, I thought you were asking me to pull you here. Attila had a careful expression on her face. She was afraid of making Wuming unhappy. Wuming smiled helplessly. It turned out that his spiritual power that was only used for investigation had become a burden. He had to train it properly in the future. And at this time, Wuming thought of something. My use of spiritual power is rough? Does Attila have any methods to help train spiritual power? Immediately, Attila nodded. Wuming smiled. This was like a pillow when he was sleepy. Chapter 548. According to Attila, the previous civilization she destroyed was actually a civilization that developed spiritual power. This was in line with the development of the intellectual system that was full of motherhood and love. After all, people with gentle hearts often had strong spiritual power. He had never seen Attila use such power before, but that was only because spiritual power was useless to her, which was why she almost didn't use it. After all, the giant god was an existence that used brute force to break through technique, so why would he bother with those empty things? Following that, with Attila's rough guidance, Wuming easily learned the use of spiritual power and other branches of it. For example, telekinesis now. Wah! Attila shouted in a panic because she had left the stone bed and was floating in the stone room. Even so, the stone room didn't seem crowded, as if it could adjust the internal space according to Attila. I see. The use of spiritual power is so simple, Wuming said with a smile as he looked at Attila, who was floating in the air under his telekinesis playfully. Then, Attila felt as if a pair of hands were touching her skin. She knew that it was Wuming's telekinesis. Although she didn't hate it, she didn't like it when invisible things were messing around on her skin. Because, Wuming, your spiritual power is already very strong, and if you don't keep training your spiritual power, even if it's a very crude method, to persist, it's still strengthened a lot. It's just that Wuming doesn't know how to use it. Even without me, you could have developed to this extent on your own. Attila blushed and stuttered. Attila was right. Wuming would take some time to meditate every day, but Wuming's initial meditation was just to maintain his sense of self. The root dragon had no lifespan limit, and this way, Wuming used meditation to stabilize his youthful heart so that his mentality wouldn't age with age. This was also why Wuming, who was almost 100 years old, still had the mindset of a young man and did not have the attitude of an old man at all. Of course, this was the age for ordinary people. After all, 100 years old was a complete underage age for the origin dragon, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it a baby. However, Wuming's meditation also produced side products, which were the development of mental strength and the purification of mana. Mental power was something that could not be touched. The mental power of the origin dragon? No, it should be said that it had no shortcomings in any aspect. Therefore, Wuming was able to develop mental power during meditation, and it was a very strong mental power developed through rough methods. It couldn't be helped. After all, consolidating a young heart was the main theme of Wuming. It was already very good that the spiritual power of a byproduct could reach such a level. No, it should be said that for the origin dragon such an outcome was normal. The second point was mana purification. As the root dragon, Wuming had almost unlimited mana. However, almost unlimited and infinite were two different things. In other words, Wuming's mana would also be used up. In this way there were two solutions. One was to find a way to obtain unlimited mana, and the other was to purify the mana. Wuming didn't consider the first point, and chose the second one instead. Because in Wuming's opinion, purification of mana was especially important. For example, a relic that required 100 points of mana to release could be released with only 10 points of mana after purification. This effect of getting twice the result with half the effort was what Wuming liked to pursue. Wuming didn't think that there was truly unlimited mana. The so-called unlimited mana was just the fact that the recovery speed of mana was faster than the consumption, which created the illusion of unlimited mana. However, that was only Wuming's guess. Since Wu Ming had doubts about it, he wouldn't choose that path. Instead, he chose to purify mana. Wu Ming's current mana had never been used up. At most, he only used half of it, and that was when he dealt with the last king, Rama. Even then, Wu Ming still won. After defeating the last king, he also gained a lot of benefits, which made Wu Ming even stronger. Therefore, in Wu Ming's opinion, the mana he had was enough. What he needed to do was to improve the quality of the mana. Just like what was mentioned above, a relic that required 100 points of mana to release could be released with only 10 points of mana after purification. What a surprising result. With continuous purification in the future, it might even change from 10 points of mana to 1 point or even 0 points of mana. Therefore, Wu Ming valued quality, and not quantity. In summary, Wu Ming felt that Attila's words were right. However, Wu Ming didn't agree with some of Attila's words. Wu Ming knew himself well. At most, Wu Ming would only use his mental strength to search for enemies. Moreover, he would only use it in such a simple and crude way. This was because Wu Ming didn't want to develop in that direction. Not to mention that Wu Ming had mastered the Lune magic, which was rare even in the Type Moon world. He had also mastered all the magic of the Yggdrasil world tree. Although Wu Ming didn't master many magic spells, after all, he had the nameless spellbook, which was why Wu Ming was lazy. However, the fact that he could use it wouldn't change. Putting aside the martial arts that he had learned from Skaha, apart from magic and magic, Wu Ming's killer move was the god's authority that he had obtained by killing a god. Wu Ming only had a total of 3 authorities. The 12 clones, the Savior Divine Sword, and Ling Zhuzi. Due to Wu Ming's influence, the 12 clones had combined the powers of 2 gods. In addition to the origin baptism, they were the authorities of 12 worlds. They were extremely powerful. The Savior Divine Sword was the divine weapon that Wu Ming had obtained after defeating the last king, Rama, who had killed the god slayers. Apart from that, the Savior Divine Sword contained the reward that the gods had given to the last king for killing the demon king. It was the Manchala formation that contained almost all of the gods' god relics. The Savior Divine Sword was comparable to an EX level relic and separated into the Manchala formation that contained almost all of the gods' god relics. One could say that it was an alternative gate of Babylon. Moreover, the Savior Divine Sword had been baptized by the origin baptism. It was no longer an ordinary item and had evolved to a higher level. As for Ling Zhuzi, Wu Ming had not used it for a long time. After all, Neza's ability was not considered powerful. He was only used as a demonic servant. Therefore, Wu Ming released Neza when he left the world of the god slayers. Wu Ming had reminded Neza not to cause any trouble again and again. However, Wu Ming thought it was unbearable. However, he would not care as long as nothing serious happened. Wu Ming was the Lord Demon King who had saved that world. He had even defeated the last king. Wu Ming believed that nobody would disrespect him. All in all, Wu Ming's origin dragon was powerful. Although he had used a weakened servant body many times, Wu Ming did not pay too much attention to his spirit. Because even if it was the body of a servant, it was still powerful enough. However, now that he had the guidance of a master, Wu Ming would definitely obtain new skills with half the effort. As a result, as Attila said, Wu Ming learned very quickly. He stopped teasing Attila and gently put Attila down with his telekinesis. Wu Ming used his telekinesis to lift himself up and reach the state of flight. Although Wu Ming could use mana jet and acceleration to achieve the effect of flight, it was easier to fly with his spirit. After all, Wu Ming had extremely powerful spirit. With just a thought, he could fly without any difficulty. Attila, it's all thanks to you that I can learn so quickly. Wu Ming's words made Attila, whose cheeks were still red, shake his head. Didn't I say that even without me, you can still do it? If that's the case, then I won't say thank you. After all, there's no need to say thank you between real friends. Facing Attila's strength, Wu Ming could only admit defeat. However, Attila was stunned by Wu Ming's words. Friends? Ha! At this moment, Attila had an urge to cry. Chapter 549. Obviously, Wu Ming had underestimated Attila's obsession with the word friend. As a result, Attila shed tears of joy in front of Wu Ming. Although Wu Ming could tell that Attila was happy, Wu Ming could only pretend that he did not know. He then began to apologize to make Attila laugh. After all, Wu Ming sympathized with Attila, who had been alone for 14,000 years. However, Attila did not need sympathy. If he sympathized with her, it would be an insult to her. No, it should be said that for anyone who could survive 14,000 years alone and still maintain a gentle character, sympathizing with her was equivalent to insulting her. Therefore, Wu Ming would not sympathize with her. He would only bring her happiness as a friend. As expected, Wu-Ming is very gentle. Although Attila said that, he wasn't a fool. Attila had already felt that she was thinking for him. Wu-Ming smiled helplessly. As no one had ever treated Attila this way, the warmth that Wu-Ming brought to her made her feel extremely gentle. Wu-Ming did not think that he was gentle. It was just a necessary concern for a friend. Even if he was really gentle, he would only have feelings for the people he cared about, such as Mayu and the rest. To Attila, who was a stranger not long ago, Wu-Ming was not gentle at all. Although he was sorry, it was the truth. However, Wu-Ming believed that as time passed, Wu-Ming would be able to treat Attila like how he treated Mayu and the rest. Wu-Ming was just trying his best to talk to her and bring Attila more new things. Without thinking about it, Wu-Ming said to Attila as it was almost time. "It's almost time for me to go." After all, Wu-Ming had not completed what he needed to do in the Singularity in the United States. The Celtic Holy Grail was still in Maeve's hands and he had to get it. Moreover, there was still a Holy Grail in Wu-Ming's relic space. Wu-Ming still had to give it to Chaldea. As for the other Holy Grail, Wu-Ming's Sword of Salvation was the carrier of that Holy Grail. After Wu-Ming finished speaking, Attila looked slightly lonely. "That. Because I pulled your spiritual body here, the flow rate here is completely different from that Singularity." Attila blushed and stuttered as she was afraid that she would anger Wu-Ming. When Attila said this, how could Wu-Ming not know? Attila just wanted him to stay a little longer and accompany her more. Wu-Ming wasn't angry, or rather, it should be said that he shouldn't be angry. After being stunned for a while, Wu-Ming smiled. "If that's the case, I'll take a break here. After all, this is a rare opportunity to slack off." As Wu-Ming spoke, he flew to Attila's lap and lay down again. Attila was not as surprised as she was last time. Instead, she smiled happily. Just like that, Wu-Ming and Attila started chatting in the stone room. Although it was called chatting, it was basically Wu-Ming talking about his own experiences. Attila was listening and she would complain about Wu-Ming from time to time. Then she would be teased by Wu-Ming. When she realized what was going on, both of them laughed. Then Wu-Ming continued. Attila was lonely. She did not ask for anyone to talk to her. However, she felt very happy to have someone tell her stories. Moreover, this was Wu-Ming's story. Attila was very interested in this first friend of hers. After some time, both of them were still in the same mode. One of them was talking and the other was listening. Suddenly, a hesitant look appeared on Attila's face. Did something happen? Wu-Ming immediately noticed Attila's abnormality and asked patiently. "It's almost time?" Attila said with a hint of sadness in his voice. Wu-Ming had a rough idea of the time he was referring to when it was almost time. It was almost time for Wu-Ming's spiritual body to disappear. It made sense. Even if the flow of time here was very different from the other side, it was impossible for Wu-Ming to stay here forever. After all, Wu-Ming was now a spiritual body. But this was also good. After all, Wu-Ming's matter at the Singularity was not settled yet. Wu-Ming looked at his faintly discernible body, as well as Attila's happy yet lonely eyes, and asked solemnly. "Attila, do you want to go to the outside world?" Go to the outside world, to see? Attila obviously did not think about this. She was a weapon left behind. Her only purpose was to wait and dream. At least that was the case for now. Wu-Ming read Attila's thoughts as a weapon from her eyes. "I don't think a creature with such gentle emotions is a weapon. If that's the case, then this world is too cruel to you." With that said, Wu-Ming subconsciously touched his arm as if he was touching something. Wu-Ming thought of Enkidu, who willingly followed him. Back then, Wu-Ming did not have the ability to fight against the gods, so he could only retreat strategically. Enkidu's soul willingly turned into Heavenlock and followed Wu-Ming. Although Enkidu kept saying that she was a weapon and eventually turned into a weapon, even so, Wu-Ming did not think a person with such gentle emotions was a weapon. Even if she was once a weapon and now turned back into a weapon. This principle was the same for Attila. These emotions are just remnants of the previous civilization. I don't have any emotions. With that said, Attila showed a self-deprecating and lonely expression. She slowly lowered her head. "I'm just a weapon. I'm the vanguard of the stars, Attila the giant god." Attila lowered her head more and more as she spoke, and her tone became weaker. In the end, Wu-Ming could not hear what Attila was saying anymore. Attila was almost burying her head in her chest. Although Attila did not have a chest, cough cough, Wu-Ming heard fear in Attila's words. Attila was afraid that Wu-Ming would give up on her because of her identity as a weapon. This would cause Attila to lose her only friend. "Aren't you looking down on me too much?" Wu-Ming pretended to be angry. He used his telekinesis to fly up and level with Attila's head. He then used his telekinesis to lift Attila's head. If you think your feelings are so cheap, then I'm really going to be angry. Attila stared at Wu Ming with her big eyes. She did not say anything. Although I've just gotten to know you, Attila, I don't think your feelings are fake. If that's the case, what about our friendship? Wu Ming's words left Attila speechless and dumbfounded. I don't think our feelings are fake. Friendship is not judged by the length of time. Even if it's a short relationship, I think it's your true feelings. Wu Ming said to Attila word by word seriously. Remember, as long as you want freedom, I'll definitely help you. With my original body's ability, I'll definitely be able to free you from here. Wu Ming looked at Attila with firm eyes without a trace of deceit. He spoke his thoughts word by word. Wu Ming did not think that Attila would use her own will to destroy him after being freed because Attila already had feelings. It was a feeling that was both gentle and pure, strong and tolerant. Wu Ming felt that such a Attila was qualified to live in the outside world. Wu Ming. Attila did not know what to say for a moment. Of course, if you're not satisfied, I'll personally capture those wandering stars and let them liberate you and give you freedom. Wu Ming said confidently, giving Attila a feeling of as long as it's him, I'll definitely be able to do it. As the root dragon, Wu Ming naturally had that kind of ability. It was quite difficult now, but when Wu Ming became an adult, it would be very easy. I swear on my identity as the root dragon that as long as you don't give up, our friendship will always exist. Although this was not good for the civilizations that Attila destroyed, the dead were gone. Wu Ming believed that if those good civilizations were still alive, they would definitely forgive such an innocent girl. As for the opinions of those bad civilizations, sorry, so be it if they were destroyed. Thank you, my friend. Attila held Wu Ming in front of her with both hands. Tears flowed down from the corner of her eyes as she smiled happily. Chapter 550. Fifth Singularity, America Continent, a crater near Alexandria. Achilles was driving the chariot, pacing back and forth near the crater, looking extremely frustrated. Sharon and Rama on the chariot were also frowning, but they did not dare to act rashly. Because it was too strange, there was no movement from the bottom of the crater. It had been a few minutes since Wu Ming went down. Although they thought that even Wu Ming would not be able to finish the battle in a few minutes, it was too strange that there was no movement at all. Just then, in their magic perception, the magic power in the crater dissipated. Did we win? Ka Rong used his all-seeing eyes and looked down at the area that had become clear. Then, Sharon saw a black shadow flying toward the top of the crater, but Sharon still could not see who it was. Get ready. Sharon raised his bow. Achilles and Rama nodded their heads and took out their weapons. After all, it would be bad if it was not Wu Ming but an enemy. First, it would mean that Wu Ming had been defeated, and it was unknown whether he was alive or dead. Second, if even Wu Ming could not defeat an enemy, it would be a dead end for them. As time passed, the figure came up. Fortunately, it was Wu Ming and not an enemy they had never seen before. It's my friend. Looks like he succeeded. Rama looked at the golden cup in Wu Ming's hand and sighed in relief. Why is he carrying a woman up here? Could it be that the strong enemy below is this woman? Achilles also saw the Holy Grail in Wu Ming's hand, but his eyes were sharper. At the same time, he also saw the girl in the same wedding dress as Wu Ming in Wu Ming's arms. At first, Achilles did not see it. After all, both of them were wearing white and it was too dazzling to see them together. If it were not for the girl's golden hair dancing with the wind, Achilles would have to wait until Wu Ming got closer to see her. Then Sharon, who was still observing with his eyes wide open, noticed something and immediately cried out. Wait, what else is coming up? Just as Karong finished speaking, a white figure suddenly charged out from behind Wu Ming, or perhaps beneath him from the giant pit. Dong! The white figure jumped onto the ground at the edge of the crater, stirring up a thick cloud of dust. Soon after, the dust settled and the newcomer appeared before the eyes of Ka Rong and the rest. It was a white-haired girl. Most of her skin was exposed in her revealing white ethnic attire. Her tan skin was in a healthy state, and she held a tricolored sword in her hand. Her eyes were filled with a strong desire to destroy as she stared at Sharon and the other two. This person was very dangerous. Be it Sharon, Achilles, or Rama, all of them had the same thought. At this moment, Wu Ming also flew up. Wu Ming used his telekinesis to control his body and gently landed beside the white-haired girl. Attila, calm down. Wu Ming gently said to the white-haired girl. After hearing Wu Ming's words, the white-haired girl nodded without hesitation. The desire in her eyes dissipated, replaced by a dazed look. As for why Attila was so obedient to Wu Ming, it was because this was a gift from Attila to Wuming, a friend. I can't help you now, so I'll let my clone, my dream, help you, Attila said before Wuming disappeared. Then Wuming realized that he had obtained a slave who was completely obedient to his orders. Thinking of this, Wuming's face showed a speechless expression. So the so-called help was completely obedient to his orders. Wasn't this the same as a weapon? Not noticing Wuming's subtle expression, after seeing that Attila was no longer a threat, Achilles and Sharon looked at each other and landed. What's going on? What happened to you down there? Sharon walked down from the chariot and came before Wuming, asking in confusion. He could also see that the white-haired girl was no longer an enemy, but the powerful pressure just now still made Sharon worried. Achilles and Rama felt the same. It was as if they were facing their natural enemy. It's like this. Wuming looked at Attila, then put the unconscious blonde girl in wedding dress into Achilles' chariot, and at the same time, placed the Holy Grail in the girl's arms, then began to explain. Wuming told Sharon and the others about how he accidentally entered the incomplete inherent enchantment created by the Holy Grail. Wuming did not tell Sharon and the others about his dreamlike trip to the moon's spaceship and his encounter with Attila. It was not that Wuming did not believe that Sharon and the others could not keep a secret, but this matter was not suitable to be told to outsiders. After all, wandering star, giant god, 14,000 years and so on were too mysterious and complicated, it was better to tell a little lie. This is the Hun King Attila, an old acquaintance and good friend of mine. Then Wuming explained the origin of Attila in a half-true, half-false manner. Due to Attila's strong desire to destroy, she was sealed by the holder of the Holy Grail in Rome, trapped in the Holy Grail. Due to the appearance and death of the demon god Pillar, Attila's seal was broken, and the magic pillar visible to the naked eye just now was Attila releasing the seal, and entering the incomplete inherent enchantment was also Attila's dream. In any case, Achilles and Rama believed that she was sealed. Just like Berserker's desire to destroy, it made them feel like they were facing a great enemy. The golden-haired girl lying on Achilles' chariot was the sacrifice summoned by the demon god Pillar. After the demon god Pillar was destroyed, the girl reappeared. Because she had the support of the Holy Grail by her side, she did not disappear due to excessive weakness. After that, Wuming brought the blonde girl with the Holy Grail out of the huge pit with Attila. Because Attila used the method of jumping, she reached the ground one step faster than Wuming, who flew up. In short, everything is over. Sharon no longer paid attention to the loopholes in Wuming's words, giving Wuming enough face. After all, Wuming was not good at lying. Even if Achilles and Rama were fooled as a teacher, Sharon was not fooled, and Teacher Ma was not that naive. Indeed, now that we have the Holy Grail in Maeve's hands, this singularity can be fixed. The four of them heaved a sigh of relief. This singularity was finally over. Let's go back to Tachika's side. Achilles drove the chariot, carrying Sharon and Rama, while Wuming and Attila walked on the ground. According to Wuming's words, I want to chat with an old friend. But in reality, Wuming was afraid that Attila would not be used to riding Achilles' chariot, so Wuming felt that it would be better to walk with Attila. And at this moment, a huge amount of magic suddenly condensed in the sky, and a huge circle embedded in the sky appeared in everyone's vision. Immediately, the circle exploded with a powerful magic, and a beam of light descended from the sky, presumably landing at Tachika's place. Chapter 551. Boom! The explosion swept over from Gadotzi's direction, and the resulting hurricane lifted a layer of skin from the surrounding ground. Nay, Achilles' 3 immortal horses were blown by the hurricane and let out a difficult cry. The 3 immortal horses held on for a moment, then dragged the empty chariot and was blown into the sky by the hurricane. Of course, it was not that Achilles and the others were blown away by the wind, but because Achilles and the others got off the chariot before it was blown away. Achilles and Rama lay on the ground, while Sharon held the unconscious blonde girl and hid behind Achilles and Rama. Wuming stood in front of Attila, blocking the hurricane for Attila, and looked at the strange light circle in the sky where the light beam had just been shot. There was no doubt that the explosion and hurricane were caused by the light beam attack. It really is that guy. This is exactly the same as Floro's light beam attack. The guy Wuming was talking about was the Magic King. After all, only that guy could set up a huge light circle in the sky of a singularity and launch such a powerful attack. Floro said that he had obtained the power of the king, and the black light beam shot by the dark light ball gave Wuming the same feeling as the light beam that fell from the sky just now. While Wuming was thinking, in just a few seconds the hurricane stopped. Wuming shook the dust off his body and looked at Attila. Are you okay? Attila, who was not stained by a trace of dust, shook her head in the face of Wu Ming's concern. I can do it myself, Attila said coldly. Attila in her servant form was a cold warrior form, which could also be understood as the three nothingness. Wu Ming understood what Attila meant. She was the clone of the giant god Attila and was not so weak. Even without Wu Ming she would not be affected by the hurricane. That being said, I think I did the right thing in protecting my friends. Wu Ming smiled, then turned away from Attila and walked towards Ka Rong and the others. Attila stared blankly for a moment as if attracted by Wu Ming's words. But in an instant, Attila regained her cold and emotionless appearance. However, Attila's gaze remained fixed on Wu Ming. Wu Ming walked over to Sharon and helped him up. At the same time he picked up the golden-haired girl and the Holy Grail. I can only say that he is worthy of being called the Great Sage. Wu Ming's meaning was simple. Sharon could have given up on the girl and let her be blown away by the hurricane. You think too highly of me. I'm only here for the Holy Grail. Sharon shook his head with a smile. Although that was what he said, he could have taken the Holy Grail away and only protected it. Instead he chose to protect the girl as well. No matter what, the result will not change. Wu Ming then looked at Achilles. Achilles, can you summon your chariot back? Of course not. Achilles said unhappily. Of course, Achilles was not unhappy with Wu Ming but with the sudden attack. After that, Achilles whistled, and the chariot pulled by the three immortal gods flew over from the horizon. Wu Ming put the girl and the Holy Grail on the chariot and flew up. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, I'll go check the situation first. You guys go with Attila. After that, Wu Ming sped up and flew in the direction of Gadotsi. Then Achilles and Sharon got on the chariot. Miss Attila, please come up. Sharon said carefully. Attila did not say anything. She nimbly got on the chariot without any hesitation. However, the owner of the chariot, Achilles, looked at Attila full of fighting spirit. He was very interested in this servant who could make him feel pressure. He glared at Achilles, warning him not to cause trouble, and then looked at Rama. King Rama, what's wrong with you? The reason why Sharon asked this was because Rama was in a daze. Rama came back to his senses and looked at Sharon. Nothing, just a bad premonition suddenly appeared in my heart, as if something is going to happen to Sito. Then Rama shook his head, no longer thinking about the messy things, and got on the chariot. In this way, Achilles reluctantly pulled the 5 servants and began to move in the direction of Wu Ming. On Wu Ming's side, because Wu Ming used magic to assist his mental power to speed up, and the distance between Wu Ming and Gadotsi was not far, so in the blink of an eye, Wu Ming arrived at the original gathering place of Gadotsi and the servants. At this moment, there was nothing left of what was originally a plain. The grass disappeared, the stones were annihilated, the trees were shattered, and there was no trace of it. It could only be judged by the magic of the earth that this used to be a good fertile land. However, the earth's experience was not good. The earth was directly lifted, revealing a barren yellow color. It could be said that there was nothing but barren land here now. But Wu Ming did not want this to be the case. As if God was on Wu Ming's side in the barren land, Wu Ming saw a different place from the surrounding. The holy round shield appeared in a place similar to a mound, and then the round shield peeled off the earth and 2 figures walked out. Tachika. Matthew. Wu Ming quickly flew over. Is it assassin? Cough cough cough. Tachika was excited, then she ate a mouthful of dust and coughed. Senpai, are you okay? Matthew helped Gadotsi out of the mound and to the clean flat ground next to it. This made Gadotsi, who had been coughing, feel much better. Cough cough. I'm really choking to death. Gadotsi had an uncomfortable look on his face. After seeing how lively Gadotsi was, Wu Ming was no longer worried and asked about the other servants. It's good that you're okay, what about the others? When Wu Ming asked, Gadotsi and Matthew both looked sad. Is that so? I understand. Wu Ming nodded. That was an unnecessary question. Under such an attack, the others might have returned to the martyr's palace. It could be said that they were almost wiped out. In the end, if Matthew didn't react and condensed his noble artifact into a point to protect me, I'm afraid I would have. Gadotsi did not continue. So that was the case. Wu Ming pondered. I'm sorry, Senpai Sarand, I really didn't have the confidence to block that attack, so I could only choose to protect Senpai. Matthew lowered his head in guilt. Then Wu Ming put his hand on Matthew's head. Don't worry, I think they're thinking the same thing. Compared to protecting their dead servants, it's more important to make sure that Tachika is safe. What Wu Ming said was right. When the beam of light was about to hit, All the servants used their strongest noble phantoms to delay the beam of light so that Mashu could use her noble phantoms to protect Gadatsi. It's okay, Matthew, don't blame yourself. Gadatsi hugged Matthew and comforted him. Senpai, it's very dirty. What Mashu meant was that her body was covered with dust and she looked like a refugee from a slum. It's okay, I like Matthew the most, this is nothing. Gadatsi rubbed her face against Matthew. Senpai. Matthew's face instantly turned red. Although I'm sorry to disturb you, I want to say that the crisis may not be over yet. Wuming pointed to the light circle in the sky. Chapter 552. Gadatsi and Matthew both followed Wuming's finger and looked at the sky. The strange huge circle was like a circular lamp that was pressed on the huge ceiling in the sky, giving people a very mysterious feeling. Hey. What is that? Gadatsi was obviously shocked. It's never happened before. Matthew also widened his eyes and looked at the huge circle in the sky. Like Gadatsi and Matthew, Wuming also stared at the sky. Then Wuming said his guess. If I'm not wrong, it's probably the Magic King's noble phantasm. Hey? Gadatsi and Matthew were both shocked. After all, I don't think anyone else can release that level of attack over the singularity except for that guy. Gadatsi and Matthew looked at each other. It seemed that this was the only possibility. I guess I'm afraid that every singularity has this circle, but the circle was hidden by that guy. It could be said that Wuming had not been to the previous singularities, and the only one he had been to was Winterwood City. When he was in Winterwood City, Wuming noticed that the sky was slightly different, but he didn't pay much attention to it. When he was in London, because he was underground, he couldn't see the sky, so Wuming didn't pay attention to it. At this singularity, Wuming noticed the abnormality in the sky. Deliberately hiding it made people notice the abnormality. That guy's move is bad. Wuming ridiculed mercilessly. But even so, the other party didn't suffer any losses. The price of exposing this noble phantasm was that almost all the servants were sent back to the Valhalla. Nightingale, Geronimo, Atlanta, Edison, Tamamonome, Billy Boy, Robin Hood, Elizabeth, Kyoheim, Helena. It could be said that the attack just now had killed those 10 servants. At present, the American continent, which had more than 30 servants in the beginning, was now left with only a dozen servants. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and the unconscious Roman girl escaped the attack because they were with Wuming. Because of the duel, Arjona and Karna were located in the northwestern part of the American continent. He reckoned that Ison and Demetrius, as well as Hercules, who had Wuming filling up the lake, should not have been affected. Maeve and Ceto were sent away by Wuming using the portal. Gadatsi's personal servant, Matthew Gillett, and Wuming, who was currently with Gadatsi. Finally, there was Pamilia, who was sleeping in Riverton. Speaking of this, Wuming was quite helpless and angry. According to Gadatsi, Pamilia said that she would take a nap when it was time for her to sleep. Knowing that their team's mission was only to delay the Romans, Pamilia said that she would take a nap first. Then there was no then. The vampire was still in Riverton. At least Wuming could be sure that she was not here. But there was no other way. Who would have thought that a simple delay would trigger the appearance of the demon god pillar? If Pamilia was here before, even if Floros got the power of the Magic King, Wuming estimated that Pamilia would be able to kill Floros if he used his trump card. After all, even if a child was armed with a machete, he would not be able to fight an unarmed Special Forces soldier. No longer thinking about this matter, Wuming began to think about the remaining servants. In addition to Wuming himself, there were a total of 14 servants left. Not to mention the strength of the remaining servants, it could be said that if it was an ordinary Holy Grail war, the 14 servants except for Wuming could be said to be enough. However, with only 14 servants in this American continent, where the magic power had been raised to the level of a god, it was not enough. Not to mention there was a guy like Ison who was useless and only knew how to drive a boat. It could be said that if the halo in the sky did not hide anymore except for Wuming, the rest of the servants would probably have to leave. Although Matthew could block the attack just now, it did not mean that Matthew could block the rest of the attack. Matthew could block it once, it was already very good. After all, Matthew was still not a mature servant. At present, Matthew was still unable to use Galahad's noble phantasm. Otherwise, there would not be a situation where Matthew could only protect Gadatsi alone. Besides, not everyone would choose to stand on Gadatsi's side. At present, only 7 servants, Wuming, Matthew, Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and Maeve, could serve as the combat power to protect Gadatsi. Pamilia's whereabouts were unknown. Maybe she had woken up or maybe she was still sleeping. The Roman girl rescued from the demon god pillar had been in a coma, and she could not leave the Holy Grail. She could only rely on the Holy Grail to maintain the integrity of her spiritual base. She could not stay too close to Rama, and even if she woke up with her broken spiritual base she would not have much combat power. As for Arzu and Karna, Karna wanted to come back to help Gadotsi, but Arzu was unwilling. It could be said that if Karna chose to help Gadotsi, then Arzu would definitely choose to help the Magus King. In this way he would be able to fulfill his wish and become enemies with Karna again. Karna, who could not get away, could only accompany Arzu as a sacrifice. Hercules probably had not broken free from the bottom of the lake yet. After all, there were so many fake heavenly locks that were no different from the real heavenly locks. Even Hercules would have to spend a little effort to break them. Of course, unless Wu Ming personally helped him break them. Ison and Demetrius. Demetrius would definitely follow Ison, and with Ison's character Wu Ming didn't expect him to do anything. It could be said that as long as he did not cause trouble he would be thankful. At this moment Maeve was not here. Sharon, Achilles, Rama and Attila were still rushing here. At present only Wu Ming and Matthew could protect Gadotsi. After thinking for a while Wu Ming waved to Gadotsi. Gadotsi, come here. Although Gadotsi was puzzled because of her trust in Wu Ming, she did not hesitate to walk over. Give me your hand. After saying that, Wu Ming stretched out his hand and held Gadotsi's slender little hand. Hein, what are you doing, assassin? Gadotsi did not care about shaking hands with Wu Ming, but Gadotsi did not understand what Wu Ming wanted to do and Matthew was the same. Could it be that this was a farewell before death? Just kidding. I'm just giving you my strongest defense. Relax. Then Wu Ming did not pay attention to Gadotsi and Matthew. Holding Gadotsi's hand, Wu Ming closed his eyes. Then a beautiful scene appeared in front of Matthew's eyes. The holy and invincible armor on Wu Ming's body, under the effect of Wu Ming's magic, emitted a dazzling brilliance. Then the armor automatically disintegrated, and then in a series of light, the armor compressed and transformed into a set of armor similar to that of a woman's. Finally, the armor attached to Gadotsi's body, under the shocked expression on Gadotsi's face, forming a slender and beautiful set of white close-fitting armor for a young girl. This made Gadotsi, who still had her hand in Wu Ming's hand, stunned. Then an earth-shattering scream resounded through the sky. Ah! Chapter 553. Wah. Wah. What is this? A person who was wrapped in close-fitting female armor and wearing an elegant dragon-crowned helmet shouted in excitement and surprise. This person was none other than Gadotsi, who was wearing Wu Ming's armor. Say, Senior, are you okay? Matthew stood beside Gadotsi at a loss and asked cautiously. I'm fine, I'm just shocked to put on assassin's armor. Gadotsi's voice came from the seemingly thin but actually heavy armor. Fortunately, Wu Ming adjusted the armor and added a lot of adjustment tactics. The specific effect was that Gadotsi, a modern girl without the strength to truss a chicken, could wear such a compressed and heavy armor without changing the quality and defense. After that, Wu Ming smiled helplessly as he looked at Gadotsi, who was uncomfortable talking to Matthew because of the helmet. Relax, inject magic, the armor will respond to you. Although Gadotsi was a novice with no experience in magic after so long, under the guidance of Roman, Olga Marie and Gadotsi, she could still do the ordinary extraction and application of magic. With that said, as if demonstrating, Wu Ming put his hand on Gadotsi, and then the helmet on Gadotsi's head split and attached to her shoulders and back. So simple? Gadotsi was interested and she used magic with her small face. In an instant, the helmet that was disassembled and disassembled closed again and wrapped Gadotsi's small head. Although Wu Ming wanted to complain about Gadotsi's constipated expression just now. Then, Gadotsi controlled the helmet to disassemble again, and her excited little head was exposed again. It's really amazing. Then Matthew poked Gadotsi. Senior, now is not the time to play. In an instant, Gadotsi's small face became awkward. Right, assassin, you gave me the armor, what will you do? Gadotsi saw before that the cover that trapped the demon god pillar was made of Wu Ming's armor. And Gadotsi also saw that the defense wall was not damaged at all under the powerful attacks of Wu Ming and the demon god pillar. This armor was undoubtedly a super powerful noble artifact. If you don't have this armor, what will you do when the light circle attacks again? Gadotsi said worriedly. Indeed, Wu Ming, the berserker Holy King Sealan's strongest noble artifact was this set of armor. With an invincible defense and a light spear that could be strengthened, Wu Ming could be said to be invincible. Of course, this invincibility only meant that Wu Ming would not be defeated. It did not mean that he was truly invincible. If Demon God Shutten could use the Holy Grail and the blessing of the Sun God to release the power of the sun because Wu Ming thought it was troublesome, then facing the Demon God Pillar Floros not long ago, Wu Ming really had no way to kill it with the body of a servant. Although it seemed that Floros was no different from the other Demon God Pillars, Floros said that it had obtained the power of its king. Naturally, it could not be compared to the other Demon God Pillars. However, it was precisely because of this that Wu Ming borrowed Rama's noble artifact. It's because I'm afraid that the light circle will attack again, so I let you wear this noble artifact. Wu Ming gently touched Gadatsi's little head and messed up her hair. If it's me, I have it. Wu Ming turned his head. Following the direction where Wu Ming turned his head, Gadatsi saw a holy sword that was similar to the Excalibur floating beside Wu Ming. As if responding to Wu Ming's words, the divine blade of salvation shone with holy light and attracted lightning. You should know that the best defense is offense. With the divine blade of salvation, nothing will happen to me. But if you don't have this set of armor, it's very likely that something will happen to you. Wu Ming tried to reason with Gudazi. So, be obedient to Chica. In the end, Wu Ming ended with a pampering tone. I know. Gadatsi's cheeks blushed. No matter how good their relationship was, after experiencing such gentle flirting, as a girl who has never been in a relationship before, it was quite fatal. Even Mashu, who was next to him, was blushing like a braised crab. Wu Ming nodded with satisfaction. Sharon and the others will be here soon. You two remember not to run around. Gadatsi and Matthew nodded. Then I'll leave for a moment. With that, a dark purple ripple swallowed Wu Ming, and then the ripple disappeared. Can you hear me? At this time, Gadatsi's wristband sounded. Leader? Is the communication device fixed? Gadatsi asked in surprise. However, in response to Gadatsi's inquiry, only the voice was heard and not the image. But the voice was no longer Olga Marie's voice but Roman's. How could it be fixed? That's magic power comparable to hundreds of holy swords. The explosive magic power directly blew up Chaldea's device. Da Vinci's really tired this time. However, before Roman could finish complaining, Olga Marie's voice was heard again. Get out of my way. After Olga Marie's roar, there was the sound of someone falling to the ground. Then, Olga Marie's calm voice was heard. Speaking of which, under the attack just now besides you, who else survived? Yes, Assassin is fine. Achilles, Sharon, and Rama who were with Assassin are also fine. The attack just now seemed to be directed at us, or rather, it was directed at Senpai, Mashu explained to Olga Mai. Is that so? Gadatsi heard Olga Marie's voice and was a little confused. Why did it sound like she was relieved? In fact, Olga Marie wanted to ask for Wu Ming's comfort, but after all, she was at Sundara, so it was unlikely that she would ask directly. Ahem. In short, Chaldea can only perform simple communication and ray shift for now. It's too dangerous for Tachika and Matthew to continue staying there. Haven't all the enemies been defeated? Let's use ray shift to come back first. This made Gadatsi and Matthew shocked. After all, Gadatsi and Matthew's mission was to repair the singularity. It could be said that the two completely completed the mission in the past few singularities before returning to Chaldea. But this time Olga Marie proposed to temporarily return to Chaldea. Haven't all the Holy Grails in this singularity been collected? As long as the Holy Grail is taken away from this singularity, it will repair itself. Then Gadatsi smiled awkwardly. That, Director, have you forgotten? All the recovered Holy Grails are temporarily in Assassin's hands. Matthew also added a fatal blow. And the Celtic Holy Grail is not in the hands of the Senior Cylinder, it seems to be in the hands of Queen Maeve. In other words, you've been busy in this singularity for half a day, and you haven't gotten a single Holy Grail. Olga Marie's tone was a little strange. Although I'm sorry, Matthew said. But it's true, Gadatsi said. Then the device on Gadatsi's wrist dimmed, which meant that the other party had cut off the communication. Gadatsi and Matthew looked at each other and smiled helplessly. Chapter 554. A moment later, Gadatsi's bracelet lit up again, but this time the contact was no longer Olga Marie, but Dr. Roman. Roman said that Director Olga Marie was muttering, "How come we didn't get a single Holy Grail? That guy is an idiot. We could have just given the Holy Grail to Chaldea. He cursed as he left the control room. He seemed to have returned to his own room. Will the director be okay? Gadotsi asked worriedly. Don't worry, the director isn't as weak as you think. She's still very strong. Romo's calm and amiable voice was heard. On this point, Roman could be said to have the most right to speak. After all, when Olga Marie became the director, Roman had already been in Chaldea for a long time. It could even be said that Roman was Olga Marie's senior in a sense. For the time being, Gadotsi and Matthew began to think about what to do next. Then, Doctor, what should we do next? Matthew asked. This question made Roman silent. At present, the 3 Holy Grails were already in the hands of Wuming, and the Celtic Holy Grail was also in the hands of Maeve. It could be said that as long as Wuming went to see Maeve, brought the Holy Grail back and gave it to Gadotsi, then everything would be solved. So, at present, it seemed that the only thing to do was to wait. In the control room, Roman helplessly scratched his head, and then said to Gadotsi on the other side. Well, let's meet up with Sharon first, then think about what to do next. Roman said weakly. Okay, Doctor. Then Gadotsi and Matthew closed the communication, and began to walk in the direction where Sharon and the others left to meet up with them. In the control room, the remaining staff members were working nervously. Only now could Roman breathe a sigh of relief. Roman sat down on the chair behind him and leaned back slightly. Magic Kings? Noble artifact. Heh. The 5th singularity, the American continent, Washington's White House. When Wuming sent Sito and Maeve away using the portal, he had set this place as his destination. After all, this was their base camp. It was much safer than other places. However, in the end, Wuming still miscalculated. Dark purple ripples appeared, and Wuming jumped out of the ripples. Wuming stood firmly on the ground, but what welcomed him was an incomparably huge tentacle. Dong! In an instant, the tentacle slammed heavily on the ground, and the ground caved in because of the huge impact of the tentacle. Immediately afterward, the saber light with lightning struck the tentacle, instantly cutting it off. Wuming stood beside the severed tentacle and brandished his sword. Without a doubt, the tentacle did not hit Wuming. The moment the tentacle fell, Wuming dodged it. Wuming looked at the owner of the tentacle with a serious expression, a huge pillar of flesh that rose into the sky. Demon God Pillar Flawless. That's right, at this moment, in front of Wuming on the White House Square in Washington, the same Demon God Pillar as Flawless stood there. Wuming had a guess. This Demon God Pillar Flawless was summoned from the Holy Grail held by Maeve. The evidence was Maeve, who was embedded in the flesh wall of the Demon God Pillar with only half of her body exposed. At this moment, Maeve's body was drooping and she was obviously unconscious. As for Sito, who was already unconscious and brought back by Maeve, Wuming, who had already spread out his mental power, indicated that he did not find him. Wuming estimated that Sito was either swallowed by the Demon God Pillar and was in the body of the Demon God Pillar, or had been killed by the Demon God Pillar and returned to the Martyr's Palace. At this moment, Flawless, who failed the sneak attack, spoke. You can really find this place, Dragon of Origin. It was still Lev's voice, and it was still an unpleasant voice. Demon God Pillars are all as disgusting as cockroaches. This is really an eye-opener. Wuming mocked mercilessly. Although Wuming also knew that to kill the Demon God Pillar, he had to kill all 72 of them at once, but he could resurrect immediately after dying together. This was a bit of a bug. Of course, an ordinary Demon God Pillar that appears at a singularity can't do it, but I have the King's blessing. Of course such a thing can be done. As long as there was the Holy Grail and the sacrifice, Flawless could appear on his own. This was the reason why Flawless suddenly appeared in Alexandria, and the reason why he could resurrect in the White House after dying. But I didn't expect you to put the Holy Grail in the hands of this servant. I thought you had already put it away. But this is good. If not, I won't be able to appear again. Haha. The Demon God Pillar laughed and shook his body. Maeve, who was embedded in the body of the Demon God Pillar, also shook along with the Demon God Pillar. Then Maeve was shaken awake. I am? Maeve, who had just woken up, was still not completely awake. She was a little confused about the current situation. Maeve, are you okay? Wuming immediately shouted at Maeve after seeing Maeve wake up. Wuming's shout woke Maeve up, but it also made Maeve quite unhappy. Really, little Sai, can't you pretend that you don't care about me? This way this guy can threaten you. Maeve was like a young girl looking at Wuming with a puffed-up face, expressing her dissatisfaction. Maeve and Sito were originally here, but for some reason Maeve's Holy Grail had an abnormality. It directly used Maeve and Sito's body as a sacrifice to summon the Demon God Pillar. Because Sito's spiritual base was damaged, she was equivalent to half a servant, so Maeve acted as the other half and was embedded in the demon god pillar. Before her magic was absorbed, Maeve heard the voice of the demon god pillar. That was what Flalo said at that time. "Ah, I'm back. Wait for your death, Wu-Ming." Then Maeve fainted. Wu-Ming told Maeve his real name. So, according to Maeve's own judgment, she knew one thing, that was Flalo's was Wu-Ming's enemy. So Maeve originally wanted to pretend that she didn't know Wu-Ming, in case Flalo's threatened Wu-Ming with her. "But you directly called my name. Isn't this telling it that I'm very important to you?" Although she was complaining, Maeve was smiling. That was joy. It was impossible for Wu-Ming not to know this, but Wu-Ming still called Maeve, exposing their relationship and giving Flalo's an opportunity. Because Wu-Ming was worried about Maeve, it was impossible for him to not recognize Maeve because of threats. Even if I did that, Flalo's wouldn't be fooled. After all, Flalo's had said before that since Wu-Ming came to this singularity, Flalo's had been monitoring Wu-Ming. Perhaps Flalo's already knew about the relationship between Wu-Ming and Maeve, and revealing half of Maeve's body was probably premeditated. "That's right. It's because I know about your relationship that I devoured the guy whose spiritual base was about to die in this woman. In this way I can expose her outside and use it to threaten you, Dragon of Origin Wu-Ming." Facing such a situation, Wu-Ming's hand holding the divine blade of salvation couldn't help but tighten. Trouble? Chapter 555. Wu-Ming, who was being threatened, did not dare to unleash the light cannon attack of the divine blade of salvation on Flalo's because it would directly send Maeve and Flalo's away. Therefore, Wu-Ming could only suppress the power of the divine blade of salvation and deal with the demon god pillar with just a slash. Swish, a slash mixed with lightning and holy light instantly cut off many of the tentacles that were attacking him. Even the body of the demon god pillar was slashed by the flash of the blade. However, the self-healing ability of the demon god pillar that had obtained greater power was even more powerful. In just a few seconds, the cracked body healed and the tentacles grew out. However, it could be seen that even if the power was deliberately suppressed, the divine blade of salvation was still the divine blade of salvation. The holy sword that could split a star was not just for show. It could be said that the divine blade of salvation could not only be classified as a divine blade of salvation, but also as a divine blade of salvation. Such a powerful divine weapon, even if the power was suppressed, was still not something that the demon god pillar could resist. Originally, it should have been like that. However, because Flalo's had obtained the power of their king, his strength had also increased by a level. This created a very awkward situation. Flalo's could not hurt Wu-Ming, and Wu-Ming could not do anything to the demon god pillar even if he showed mercy. For example, the original divine blade of salvation that Wu-Ming used had a strength of 100. Currently, the divine blade of salvation that was transformed from the Holy Grail and Rama's divine blade of salvation had a strength of 80. Due to the deliberate suppression, the strength was reduced to 50. The original strength of the demon god pillar, Flalo's, was 30. After obtaining the power of the Magic King, the strength became 50. In this way, the two of them were equal. However, the pure data was only used as a general reference. It could not accurately express anything. It only meant that the two of them were unable to defeat each other. As expected, even after obtaining the power of our king, it is still too weak when facing the Dragon of Origin, Flalo said calmly. Indeed, as the king of Flalos had said, there was nothing to be afraid of with an immature Dragon of Origin. Even though Wu-Ming was very powerful in the eyes of many people, he paled in comparison to the Magic King who had obtained the power of the Black Soil. It was true that an adult origin dragon would possess unparalleled power. It could travel through time, move mountains and fill seas, reverse time, and even bring the dead back to life. However, the prerequisite was that Wu-Ming had to stay inside the origin and use its power. That was because the root dragon was a unique creature that was neither human, beast, nor god, that was born from the world root that gave birth to all worlds, which was why it had to borrow the power of the root to achieve invincibility. Although it was called the origin dragon and had the appearance of a dragon, the origin dragon wasn't actually a dragon. The reason Wu-Ming had the characteristics and drawbacks of a dragon was because Wu-Ming's birthplace had shifted from the great origin to the origin of the M-shaped moon. To put it simply, he was tainted with an impure bloodline. However, Wu-Ming had already been baptized inside the great origin and had basically eliminated the drawbacks of dragons. It could be said that as long as Wu-Ming continued to be baptized by the great origin, he would return to the purest form of the origin dragon. After that, as long as he went through the baptism of the Great Origin, an adult origin dragon could be said to be truly invincible. For now, as long as Wu Ming stayed inside the Great Origin, he would be invincible inside. For now, Wu Ming couldn't interfere with other worlds for the time being. Moreover, as long as Wu Ming left the Great Origin, Wu Ming's chances of losing against someone like the Magic King, who could be said to be a cheat, were definitely higher than his chances of winning against him. In other words, Wu Ming could only rely on his own power as a dragon of origin. He couldn't threaten anyone else at all. Whether it was Darius, Romo, Arthas, or even the Magic King, Wu Ming couldn't defeat any of them. However, Wu Ming himself knew this, which was why Wu Ming had resorted to using external objects. In the past, the queen of the demonic realm, Skaha, who had great wisdom, had also noticed this drawback of Wu Ming's. That was why she had let Wu Ming use the process of sublimation to obtain a noble artifact. The true strength of a servant wasn't their martial arts or anything else, but their noble artifacts, which were killer moves that could instantly turn the situation around. Not only that, but there were also many treasures that had rather miraculous functions, such as resurrecting the dead and reversing time and so on. All in all, since one's body was weak, one should use powerful weapons. That was how humans had developed. There was no reason why a higher-level species like humans couldn't understand this principle. And that was what Wu Ming did. In the beginning, Wu Ming's sublimation was very difficult, and it required a lot of effort. Now that Wu Ming had the power of origin, it was no longer so strenuous for him. He could easily sublimate items or abilities into a noble artifact. However, Wu Ming would not casually turn a weapon into a noble artifact. After all, even if he really turned a stone into a noble artifact, it would be the lowest grade of grade noble artifact. It wasn't that he couldn't upgrade it, but he didn't know how long it would take. Then the ordinary stone would become a divine stone. Therefore, if possible, Wu Ming would not simply obtain a noble artifact. In fact, Wu Ming did not deliberately obtain a noble artifact. For example, the Divine Blade of Salvation. That was the artifact that Wu Ming obtained after defeating Rama, who was the last hope, and inheriting the identity of the last king through trickery. Even if the Sword of Salvation in Wu Ming's hand was a weakened version of the Holy Sword, its power was not something that Flawless could block. As it had experienced this personally, Flawless did not completely devour Maeve to threaten Wu Ming. However, Flawless knew that it would lose if it kept defending. Therefore it was ready to make peace. Forget it, Dragon of Origin. My purpose is just to see Chaldea and the rest. In fact, I don't have the intention to fight you at all. Flawless' tentacles stopped dancing as if they were still in the air. The devil mist and the heat rays in its eyes dissipated. It seemed like it was really ready to make peace. As long as you promise not to interfere with the singularity anymore, I'll let this woman go and allow you to help Chaldea repair the singularity. What do you think? After hearing what Flawless said, Wu Ming slowly lowered the Sword of Salvation. The lightning and holy light on the blade gradually disappeared. Then Wu Ming let out a long sigh of relief. Sure enough, Flawless, even though we've had a lot of dealings, you still don't know me well. Chapter 556. What do you mean? Flawless was confused. You care about her a lot, don't you? I just need you to stop interfering with the next singularity to save her. Isn't that a good deal? Flawless' voice was like a devil's as he continued to tempt Wu Ming. Ha! Wu Ming lowered his head and laughed. It was a mocking laugh. I won't say much nonsense. Let's put it simply. I can't compromise with you, Flawless. Wasn't that a given? For example, if someone stole something from you and made a deal with you, and it was a deal that wasn't beneficial to you, most people wouldn't agree to it. But, I'm threatening you, Lord Dragon of Origin, Flawless said with a smile. Although he couldn't see the smile on the giant meat pillar, Wu Ming could feel that Flawless was smiling. Moreover, Flawless was right. Wu Ming was being threatened by Flawless at that moment. If he couldn't get rid of this threat, Wu Ming would always be controlled by others. Wu Ming frowned and held the Savior Divine Sword tightly. At that moment, Wu Ming was quite upset. Ah, Shaosai, you don't have to be threatened by this guy for me. Do what you want to do. Maeve smiled and the command spell hidden under the white silk gloves disappeared. Feeling the magical power invading his body, Wu Ming's heart skipped a beat. Maeve was using the command spell. Fortunately, Wu Ming had the ability to resist the command spell. Traveler, A+, the effect was equivalent to a solo A+, and it could greatly resist the command spell of the master. Wu Ming was able to withstand the power of the command incantation without any pressure. However, that was only the power of the command spell. If it were 2 strokes, it wouldn't be so easy. Xiao Sai, use your strongest attack relic on me with all your might. Bang. This was the sound of Wu Ming's other hand suddenly landing on the sword of salvation. Wu Ming held the Savior Divine Sword with both hands and looked up at Maeve. Maeve, don't do anything stupid. Floros also realized that something was wrong. He quickly used his tentacles to wrap Maeve up and prevent her from meeting Wu Ming. However, it was too late for Floros. Finally, love me with all your might, my lover, surrender. Maeve smiled as she looked at Wu Ming lovingly. The last command incantation was used by Mai Fu. At this moment, Wu Ming and Mai Fu no longer had a master-slave relationship, but a pure relationship between a young girl and her lover. Afterwards, Mai Fu was wrapped up by the tentacles of the demon god pillar and fused into the demon god pillar. Wait a minute. Don't come over. Floros shouted in fear. Excalibur. The third command spell allowed Wu Ming to unleash his strongest attack. Boundless white holy light, mixed with sacred golden lightning, formed a cannon of light that was like a heavenly punishment, covering the White House. Facing Wu Ming's Savior Divine Sword, Floros fell into silence and gave up struggling. It was not only because Floros knew that he could not block it, but also because he was thinking. Even Floros did not expect Maeve to be so determined to let her lover kill him. Perhaps this was the pride of being a hero and a heroic spirit. Then Floros lost consciousness. After the white light, the White House no longer existed. North of Washington, north of the Appalachian Mountains, there was a huge gully that connected to the Arctic Ocean. Endless seawater poured in as if it was reflecting someone's anger. The holy light and lightning were still rippling in the seawater. Wu Ming's attack directly cut the continent in half. The energy impact of the Savior Divine Sword was not something that could be blocked by a singularity. After all, the power to split a star was not fake. If it weren't for Wu Ming releasing his own attack and weakening the command spell's effect, perhaps the entire singularity would be shattered in the end. With his eyes closed, Wu Ming took a long breath. Although the servants were the avatars of the heroic spirits, it was still a bit uncomfortable for Wu Ming to kill the lover he had just accepted. Wu Ming had never treated the lives of the servants as lives. This was the same as Gadatsi and Matthew. They would not ignore the life and death of the singularity residents, even if Gadatsi knew that they would be repaired by history. Although this was a lie, it could be seen that Gadatsi and Matthew's hearts were noble. No, it should be said that that was what humans should be. At least, Wu Ming believed that this was what a human was, a real human. Although Wu Ming was not a human, it did not prevent Wu Ming from having the precious character of a human. Maeve. Wu Ming said Maeve's name with a little sadness. From this, it could be seen how deep Maeve's love for Wu Ming was. Without hesitation, she used the command spell to force Wu Ming to kill her along with the demon god pillar. Even if she was just an avatar who would want to be killed by the person she loved. This courage, this persistence, this dedication, completely explained that even if Maeve was in the ranks of the anti-hero, she also had the pride of a hero. Then let's meet again in the future, Mai Fu. Wu Ming said softly to the original demon god pillar, as if he was whispering to it. Then Wu Ming walked over. As the sacrifice to summon the demon god pillar, the servant had an advantage that was, no matter how powerful the demon god pillar was, how fierce the attack was, the servant as the sacrifice would always be safe. However, after the demon god pillar disappeared, the servant as the sacrifice would withdraw in a short time as if their spiritual base and magic power had been drained. This was the case with G of Justice, and the blonde Roman girl, because of the protection of the Holy Grail, did not directly withdraw. So this time, the servant as the sacrifice of the demon god pillar would be the same. It would definitely withdraw in a very short time. Wu Ming walked to Sito's side. Sito's spiritual base was about to be broken, and at this moment, his body was already faintly discernible. It could be said that at this moment, if not for the protection of the Celtic Holy Grail that fell after Floros withdrew, Sito would have already left. As far as the current situation was concerned, once the Holy Grail left Sito, Sito would immediately disappear. Now the Holy Grail was just hanging on to Sito's last breath. However, fortunately, there was the Holy Grail hanging on to Sito's last breath. In this way, Wu Ming was confident that he could save Sito. Wu Ming suddenly had a guess. Let's give it a try. With that, Wu Ming took out another Greek Holy Grail that he obtained from Ison in his protective shell space, and together with the Celtic Holy Grail, he placed it on Sito's body that was about to dissipate. The light of the Greek Holy Grail appeared and began to cooperate with the Celtic Holy Grail to nourish Sito's spiritual base. Immediately afterward, Wuming stretched out his two hands, placed them on the two Holy Grails, and began to inject magic power into the Holy Grail. At this moment, the halo in the sky changed and a beam of light fell in the direction of. Where is Tachika and the others? Chapter 557. In just an instant, the light beam shot by the aperture landed near Alexandria. That direction was definitely the direction of Gadotsi and the others. Wuming was willing to bet. However, Wuming did not do anything else and continued to infuse magic into the two Holy Grails. Fortunately, Wuming was cautious and had already given the invincible armor that was comparable to Avalon's time to Gadotsi. Therefore, Wuming was not worried about the safety of Gadotsi and the others. Why was he not worried about the safety of Gadotsi and the others? That was because Wuming had already infused a lot of magic into his precious armor in advance. In the face of danger, it would automatically decompose and form a protective shield. Dong, ignoring the explosion behind him that was even more intense than the light beam shot by the aperture, Wuming focused on healing Sito. The miraculous power of the two Holy Grails and Wuming's almost infinite magic was like a good car with good fuel. The effect of 1 + 1 was far greater than 2. After a while, Sito slowly opened her eyes. You are. Sito looked at the young man who was filled with holy light in front of her in confusion. I'm Rama's friend. I was asked by Rama to come and save you. Wuming smiled slightly. Sito was asked by Rama to come. This was not a lie, but it was not true either. It could be considered half true and half false. After all, Wuming would not be stingy with his power if he could help this couple improve their relationship. Thank you. Although Sito was still weak, she still chose to believe in Wuming. Wuming's eyes told Sito that he was not lying to her. Moreover, feeling her spiritual base gradually recovering, Sito also believed that Wuming was here to save her. Miss Sito, may I ask what your last memory is? I need to know how long you were unconscious. While her body was being healed by the Holy Grail, Sito recalled for a while and then answered Wuming. I remember that my last memory was talking to that unbelievably beautiful big sister, talking to her about her lover. Sito's face gradually turned red as she talked about her girlish thoughts. The lover that Miss Sito was talking about is Rama, right? Wuming said softly. Yes. Sito's voice became softer. He was obviously embarrassed. You two are so loving. I'm so envious. The more Wuming spoke, the redder Sito's face became. Wuming even suspected that when Sito's face became red to a certain extent, his blood vessels would burst or something. No longer teasing Sito, Wuming asked a serious question. Then, who is the lover that the beautiful woman was talking to you about? It was not that Wuming suspected Mai Fu. He knew that Mai Fu must be talking about him. Therefore, Wuming wanted to know how Mai Fu talked about him and how she loved him. That beautiful big sister Mai Fu, she told me that her lover was a hero that did not lose to Lord Rama. Wuming could not help but smile helplessly. This Mai Fu actually called Sito her sister. He saved me when I needed him. After saving the damsel in distress, he did not want to take responsibility. His temperament was volatile and he could not stay in the same place. However, he was willing to start a war for me. He did not fall for my beauty, but he was able to treat me like family. He was clearly moved, but he still held it in, and in the end, he really left. Sito muttered the words that Mai Fu said when she talked to her. I was so perfect, there were so many men pursuing me and all of them fell at my feet, but he didn't move at all. I even fell deeply in love with him. It may sound funny, but I still kept my first time for him. Hearing this sentence, Wuming was stunned. In his mind, he could not help but think of Mai Fu's sly and slightly blushing face. Although Wuming had guessed it, but in front of such a sentence, Wuming could not help but be surprised. Wuming knew about Queen Mai Fu's promiscuous love before he came to this world. Wuming guessed that Mai Fu in this world should also be like that. However, because Wuming met Mai Fu when she just came out of her ivory tower, and until Mai Fu died after Wuming left, Wuming did not see Mai Fu having intimate contact with any man except himself. In other words, Mai Fu was indeed a pure girl. Nature would be suppressed by a stronger desire, and Wuming was Mai Fu's stronger desire. Not noticing Wuming's abnormality, Sito continued. However, I'm really happy that he was able to accompany me for such a long time. Even if he left and I was attacked by death, I still love him. I hope that he can accept me and not leave me to travel alone. From the looks of it, my years of strategy have finally paid off, Sito's cheeks blushed. It seemed that imitating my Fu's tone was a great test for her. After hearing this sentence, Wu Ming smiled helplessly and satisfactorily. Wu Ming suspected that my Fu deliberately let Sito say these words to him. However, my Fu did not lie, and this was what Wu Ming was satisfied with. Although Wu Ming did not stop the movement of transferring magic power, he did not speak and quietly waited for Sito to continue. However, Sito did not continue and changed the topic. But, Lord Saren, the person Sister Mai Fu was talking about is you, right? Wu Ming didn't say his name, so for Sito to know, it was most likely Maeve who told Sito Wu Ming's name. She also told Sito about her lover, Wu Ming, in this singularity and even his appearance. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and then asked Sito, "Since you know that I'm Saren, you must also know that my Fu and I are the leaders of the forces that captured you. Don't you hate us? After all, everyone makes mistakes, and now it was you and Sister Mai Fu who saved me from being used as a sacrifice by the Greek forces. Although Sito was still used as a sacrifice by Floros, well, take this as my apology to you." Wu Ming nodded and did not persist on this point. "That, Lord Saren, Sister Mai Fu also asked me to tell you something." Wu Ming looked at Sito in confusion. Then Sito spoke. "Sister Mai Fu said that she will wait for you at the Martyr's Palace, no matter how long it takes." After that, Wu Ming was stunned. Then Wu Ming nodded. "I've received the message. Thank you, Miss Sito." That you don't have to use honorifics, just call me Sito. After all, Lord Saren and Lord Rama are good friends." Wu Ming nodded. "Speaking of which, you and Rama are really in love. No wonder he asked me to save you." Then, Sito went silent for a few seconds. "There's no such thing, I'm sorry, Lord Rama?" Sito's voice was extremely soft. If it were not for Wu Ming's good hearing, he might not have heard Sito's words. "Actually, Rama is the same as you." "Huh?" Sito widened her eyes. "One night, Rama was worried about you and had a heart-to-heart talk with me. He told me that he was sorry. Of course it was a lie." Rama did not have a heart-to-heart talk with Wu Ming, but Wu Ming, who understood Rama's heart, could naturally infer Rama's love for Sito. In order to let Sito prove his innocence, Rama forced Sito to commit suicide, which made Rama feel guilty. It was also because of this that Rama appeared in the form of a young king. According to Rama's words, it was, "Only at this time I was the Rama who would do anything for Sito. I was the husband that Sito needed, the Rama who loved her deeply." He repeated the words of Rama to Siddhartha. As a result, Siddhartha, whose face was originally flushed red, began to shed tears. "Lord Rama," Sito murmured softly. Then Sito looked at Wu Ming. "Lord Sarander, please agree to my request. Help me pass on a message to Lord Rama." However, before Sito could finish, Wu Ming interrupted him. "No need." "Ha. So, if you want to say it, you can say it yourself. Now you and Rama can meet." Hey. Chapter 558. Wu Ming's words stunned Sito. Then Wu Ming did not explain too much to the shocked Sito. "You should go and experience it for yourself." After that, Wu Ming brought Sito, whose spirit base had been repaired, to Alexandria through the teleportation door and found Rama. Then Rama and Sito were surprised. After all, as long as the two of them were too close, one of them would gradually weaken until one of them disappeared. In the end, the two of them who gradually got closer found that the two of them did not show any signs of fainting or even disappearing. "Sito? My Sito." "Lord Rama." Rama and Sito hugged each other. Everyone consciously did not disturb the couple who could never meet each other. Instead, they made space for Rama and Sito. Wu Ming and the others walked to the side. Facing the doubts of everyone about the attack that could split half the continent, Wu Ming explained what happened just now. "Is that so? I didn't expect the queen to sacrifice herself," Matthew said sadly. "For our little eggplant, sacrificing anyone was worth feeling sad." No, it should be said that Matthew would feel sad involuntarily. "However, I didn't expect you to break the curse." Gadotzi's wrist made a sound. Director, is it fixed again? It's so fast this time." Gadotzi made a sound of surprise. The voice from the terminal on Gadotzi's wrist was naturally Olga Marie's voice. Then Olga Marie's virtual projection appeared. Although he did not know the truth, Wu Ming could more or less guess. The light beam attack just now once again cut off the connection with Chaldea. Now, it seemed that Da Vinci, who was in charge of repairing it, had become more familiar with it. Or it could be said that the communication device gradually became more advanced and only needed a simple repair. Let's not talk about this first. I also heard, my servant, just now. Then, is it possible that such a situation will happen again? Olga Marie was referring to the nature demon god pillar that automatically appeared with the help of the Holy Grail and the servant. If such a Holy Grail was taken to Chaldea, it was better to be safe than sorry. If a demon god pillar appeared, the fragile Chaldea would be destroyed directly. After all, Chaldea's instruments were just some things that were not very sturdy for servant-level people. If the demon god pillar appeared, they would be done for. You don't have to worry about that. The Celtic Holy Grail and the Greek Holy Grail have already been purified by me with a large amount of mana. There's no possibility of summoning the demon god pillar anymore. As for the Roman Holy Grail, I can do the same to eliminate the threat. As for the Japanese Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail. What's wrong, assassin? Gadotsi looked at Silent in confusion. The Holy Grail of the Japanese forces has been made into my noble phantasm. Wu Ming scratched his head awkwardly and extended the sword of salvation in front of everyone. Huh? Not only Olga Marie, Gadotsi, and Matthew, but even Achilles and Sharon were stunned. Turning the Holy Grail that the servants fought for into his own weapon, it was estimated that only Wu Ming could do such a thing. Of course I will not take it away. I will give it to you. This time, everyone was collectively stunned. The servants' noble phantoms were condensed by magic power. It could be said that after the servant left, the noble phantoms could not be preserved. But listening to Wu Ming's words, it did not seem like he wanted to keep it. This is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material. Naturally it can be preserved. Wu Ming explained very considerately. Indeed, if it is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material, it is possible to leave the servant's body. As a scholar, Sharon strictly explained to everyone. He was even more certain that Wu Ming's words were correct. By the way, the attack just now did not cause any harm to you, right? Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi. We are completely fine. Gadotsi, who was wearing her armor, excitedly hugged Wu Ming's arm and shook it. Looking at Gadotsi's cheerful personality as a teacher, Sharon also smiled. Because of your noble phantoms, the enemy's attack was completely blocked. Not only us, but even the surrounding land was unharmed. I can only say that it is great that this land was not ravaged again. Roman, who was in the corner of Olga Marie's projection, said weakly. I have to say, even if I have an immortal body, I can't block it. Achilles carried his gun with both hands and looked unhappy. That's why I taught you not to be too arrogant, Achilles. Sharon once again became a teacher. Yes, I understand. Looking at everyone chatting, Matthew felt very warm, but Matthew noticed that Wu Ming was thinking about something. That, Senpai Cylinder, are you thinking about something? When Matthew said this, Gadotsi and the others also looked at Wu Ming. Wu Ming looked at everyone, then said what he was thinking. Well, for the attack just now, I don't think it was released by Floros before he died. Wu Ming's words made everyone feel a sense of crisis. Do you mean that it was released by the Magic King himself? Olga Marie said with some uncertainty. Looking at the slightly embarrassed Roman, Wu Ming said. After all, that's the Magic King's noble phantasm. It's not strange for the Magic King to use it himself. However, because the intensity of the light beam was similar to the one released by Floros, everyone thought that it was released by Floros before he died. But as the one who killed Floros, Wu Ming knew that the light beam was released after Floros left the stage. In short, I will go look for him later. Wu Ming said calmly. Then the scene fell into silence. Only Sharon and Achilles, one of them looked helpless, and the other crossed his arms in front of his chest. There was also Attila, who had been standing beside Wu Ming without any unnecessary actions or words since he came back. Other than Achilles and Sharon, everyone else cried out in shock. Wait a minute, Cylinder, are you going to look for the Magic King directly? Roman's face instantly appeared on the virtual projection screen. Go away. Olga Marie pushed Roman away. You're not really going to look for the Magic King directly, are you? Olga Marie looked worried. Directly looking for the Magic King or something as expected is still a little rushed. Gadotsi smiled with a helpless expression. Senior Cylinder, that's too dangerous. Matthew looked at Wu Ming with a serious face. Looking at everyone trying to persuade him, Wu Ming was helpless. Don't think that I'm too weak. After all, I'm someone with a special identity. After Wu Ming said that, Gadotsi, Matthew and Olga Marie remembered that Wu Ming had fought the Magic King in the underground of the Fourth Singularity. Who exactly was he? In an instant, this question filled the minds of Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie. Chapter 559. As for my identity, I will slowly tell you in the future. Of course, if someone who knows my identity wants to tell you, I won't stop them. After that, Wu Ming secretly looked at Roman. This made Roman sweat profusely. In short, Tachika and Matthew should hurry back to Chaldea to rest. After all, the sixth singularity isn't something these singularities can compare to. Wu Ming smiled and kept them in suspense. After fiercely staring at Wu Ming, Olga Marie nodded. So, Tachika and Matthew, get ready for ray shift. Let's get to work, Roman. Roman, who was reprimanded by Olga Marie, quickly left and prepared for ray shift. Gadotsi nodded, indicating that she was ready, but as if she thought of something, Gadotsi looked at Olga Marie. Director, Fufu and Miss Pamilia are still in Riverton, we have to go back to pick them up. Matthew also nodded. He was worried about Fufu, but every time Fufu was in danger, no one knew where to hide. In the end, it was always able to follow Gadotsi and Matthew back to Chaldea. You don't have to worry about this. As a servant, as long as the world starts to repair, Pamilia will be automatically ejected and forced to transfer ray shift. But that creature called Fufu. Wu Ming touched his chin and entered into a state of thinking. I'm not sure if it can be ejected. Let me go to Riverton. Wu Ming directly made the decision. Speaking of which, I'm quite interested in Fo, who Mashu has been talking about but I haven't seen. After saying that, Wu Ming opened the portal and walked in. I'll be right back. A moment later, a vampire girl who was still sleeping soundly and a creature that looked like a cat, a dog, a squirrel were brought over by Wu Ming. Fufu. The little creature named Fufu kept struggling in Wu Ming's hands, as if Wu Ming was a demon. Wu Ming loosened his grip on Fufu, and Fufu immediately ran and jumped onto Matthew's shoulder, hiding in Matthew's short hair and shivering. Fufu, are you okay? Matthew stroked Fufu's body with concern. This little guy wanted to run when it saw me. Fortunately, I was fast and caught it off guard. Otherwise, it really would have escaped. Wu Ming looked at Fufu with a playful look, which made Fufu hide even more in Matthew's hair. It can be said that the only time Wu Ming met Fufu was at the Winterwood City Singularity, when Gadotsi and Matthew were about to leave. At that time, Fufu suddenly ran out of nowhere, then quickly jumped onto Matthew and hid behind Matthew's short hair. At that time, Wu Ming had already found that this creature was hiding from him, so he was quite interested in it. However, Wu Ming always felt that it was familiar, but he couldn't remember it. But because Gadotsi and Matthew were about to be transferred by Lingzi at that time, Wu Ming also suppressed his interest. Now Wu Ming finally knew. Wasn't Fufu the cat demon named Cassapulug that he once killed in Britain? It seemed that the cat demon was not completely killed, but in the end, it seemed to have been adopted by Merlin. Fufu, don't be afraid, Senpai Cylinder is not a bad person, Matthew comforted while stroking Fufu hiding behind his neck with one hand. However, Fufu was still scared to death and refused to come out from behind Matthew's neck. However, Wu Ming was not surprised. After all, Fufu was facing someone who almost killed him. Of course, Fufu would be scared. Not only that, Wu Ming, who had the origin force, could also see the nature of Fufu just like how Wu Ming could see the nature of Roman at a glance. Fufu was one of the fourth beast, Beast 4, that held the principle of comparison. Strictly speaking, if Fufu grew up, it would be a creature on the level of Tiamat. Although Wu Ming did not think that the cat demon that he had defeated before was comparable to Tiamat, Wu Ming did not think that the cat demon that he had defeated before was comparable to Tiamat. Now, Fufu in Wu Ming's eyes was like Wu Ming in the eyes of the Magic King who had obtained the origin force. They were both immature existences. Wu Ming now understood why he could not see Fufu. It was because Fufu had been trying to avoid him. Not only because Wu Ming was once an enemy but also because Fufu, or one of the fourth beast, loved and protected humans. Wu Ming, who loved and protected humans, was a natural enemy. Fufu, who had grown up a little, could not defeat Wu Ming. Now Fufu, who had not grown at all, was not Wu Ming's opponent. It did not mean that an ordinary servant could kill it. After all, no matter how useless a dragon was, it was still a dragon. Ordinary people could not tease a dragon like the saying, "A dragon in the shallows will be teased by a shrimp." However, the reason why Fufu became like this was all thanks to Matthew. The fourth beast would absorb the evil characteristics around it and evolve into a beast. As long as the fourth beast stayed in human society, it would absorb the negative substances of human society and evolve into a terrifying beast. Fufu, who was only with Matthew all year round, was completely unable to absorb the evil information of the outside world. The result was obvious. Matthew did not have the evil of human beings that Fufu needed, but the good of human beings. Therefore, Fufu was still in the most ordinary form. However, this was also good. If it went on like this, the fourth beast would be defeated sooner or later and it would be effortless. Sure enough, Matthew is a good boy. Wu-Ming smiled gently. Huh. But this made Matthew a little overwhelmed. Wu-Ming did not explain and just shook his head. Well, let's leave quickly. I still have to find that guy. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at the surviving servants. I am waiting for your summon, Tachika. I will teach you a good lesson as your teacher. Sharon said with a smile. No problem, teacher. Gadotsi saluted playfully. Yes, summon me too. Although I am not as good as this guy, I am still very strong. Achilles looked at Wu-Ming, his eyes burning with fighting spirit. This made Wu-Ming smile a little helplessly. If possible, can you let me and Sito go with you? At this time Rama and Sito came over. Chapter 560. Go together? Gadotsi was puzzled. Yes. Romo nodded and then looked at Wu-Ming. Thanks to my friend, I can now reunite with Sito. I'm really grateful to you, my friend. Romo looked at Wu-Ming gratefully. Thank you, Master Cylinder. Sito did the same. He looked at Wu-Ming with a grateful expression. But it seems that it's because of the effect of the Holy Grail that I and Sito can be together. The Holy Grail doesn't belong to me and Sito, and if I and Sito are separated again, I'm afraid we won't have the chance to get along like this. So, I and Sito are considering whether we can go together. It was not easy for a couple to be summoned together, not to mention that both of them still had the curse on them even after they became heroic spirits. After all, this was the curse that had troubled Romo and Sito for a long time. Only a miracle like the Holy Grail could make this curse disappear temporarily. In this way, Gadotsi, who accepted Romo and Sito's proposal, could not only bring the Holy Grail back to Chaldea, but also let Sito and Romo continue to reunite, and also increase the strength of Chaldea's servants. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone, why wouldn't he do it? Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other, and then looked at Olga Marie. Well, if we use a special method to mark Romo and Sito, and then use the method of summoning servants, it's not impossible to summon the 2 of you from this singularity. Olga Marie pondered as she began to mark the spirit bases of Rama and Sito. You 2 stand over here. Then, while Romo and Sito were accepting the spiritual base mark, Gadotsi and Matthew looked at Wu-Ming again. I'm the one who prepared the Holy Grail for you. You can do whatever you want with it. Wu-Ming said with a smile. Besides, Olga has begun to mark Rama and Sito's spiritual base. She is going to send them to Chaldea. Why are you still asking me? Wu-Ming joked. Hearing Wu-Ming's words, Gadotsi and Matthew both laughed. After all, Assassin helped us get the Holy Grail, so we have to ask. You little guy. Wu-Ming smiled helplessly and touched Gadotsi and Matthew's little head, messing up their hair. Why am I touched? Matthew said weakly. At this time Olga Marie suddenly spoke. It's done. As expected, marking a servant's spiritual base is nothing to me. Olga Marie proudly said, raising her neck like a white swan. Yes, Olga is the best. Wu-Ming smiled as if he was praising a child. Although it was not easy to mark a servant with the Holy Grail in their body, it was not difficult. It could be said that if it was Roman, he could also do something like marking a servant who took the initiative to accept the mark. All in all, as long as Tachika comes back, immediately summon Romo and Sito, then they can be brought to Chaldea. Then Gadotsi looked at Romo and Sito. Then welcome in advance Mr. Romo, Miss Sito. Romo and Sito also looked at each other and smiled. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. At this time, Wu-Ming quietly came to the side of Olga Marie's projection and asked. Is there any problem? Let the servants go to Chaldea. Of course there is no problem. Chaldea has a lot of servants who accepted Tachika's summon. Olga Marie said that there was no problem at all. This made Wu-Ming stunned. When he went to Chaldea, he didn't see any other servants. As if she saw Wu-Ming's thoughts, Olga Marie smiled helplessly. I heard from Romani that you only stayed in the control room for a short while. Did you go out and see? Chaldea prepared a lot of servants' rooms, and there were a lot of servants living there. Wu-Ming smiled awkwardly. Indeed, although he went to Chaldea, he only stayed for a short time and he only stayed in the control room for a short while. At this time Roman's voice came. Reiki transfer is ready, Tachika, Matthew, get ready. Everyone immediately made way for several people who were preparing for Reiki transfer. And this. Wu-Ming picked up the Holy Grail that was still on the unconscious Roman blonde girl next to him. Anyway, it would disappear later, so it didn't matter. With a gentle toss, Wu-Ming threw the Roman Holy Grail into Gadotzi's hand. Then a lot of magic appeared around Gadotzi, Matthew, and Pamilia, who was still sleeping. That was the precursor of Reiki transfer. Then, Wu-Ming threw the Sword of Salvation in his hand, and the Sword of Salvation was directly attached to the ordinary knight sword on Matthew's waist. The armor may disappear after returning to Chaldea, but this Holy Grail made of Holy Grail will not disappear. You can use it or use it as a relic to summon me. In short, you can use it as much as you want. Gadotzi touched the armor on her body, Matthew touched the sword on his waist and nodded at Wu-Ming. Then Gadotzi and others turned into light and disappeared. As soon as Gadotzi and others left, Achilles and Karen's body began to glow. I'm running out of magic. Sharon touched the back of his head in embarrassment. I'll take my leave first. With that, Sharon turned into magic and disappeared. Looks like I'll have to disappear early just like my teacher. Then whether it's Sodric or Celander, let's have a good fight next time. No problem, let's have a good fight next time, Achilles. Wu-Ming smiled at Achilles. Then Achilles disappeared as well. Then the unconscious Roman blonde girl who had lost the protection of the Holy Grail also turned into light and disappeared after Achilles disappeared. At the same time, rays of magic light rose from other parts of the continent, which was a sign that the followers had left. Perhaps only Attila and Wu-Ming were left in this singularity. At this moment, the entire singularity began to shake violently. This was the sign that the singularity that had lost the Holy Grail was beginning to be repaired by the power of historical correction. Why don't you want to say goodbye, my friend? Wu-Ming smiled at Attila. There's no need, Attila said coldly. But the silence at the beginning meant that Attila's heart was not cold. That's true. It won't be long before I release you. This is the promise I made to you as your first friend. Attila looked at Wu-Ming and did not speak. Wu-Ming did not speak to Attila again. The two quietly watched the singularity begin to be repaired and waited for their departure. Then Attila's body began to glow. Then I'll wait. Wu-Ming looked around, but there was no one around. Wu-Ming stretched. Then it's time to find the fake Magic King. Chapter 561. In the source of chaos, traces of light came from the center of the chaos. Was strange. It was chaos, but there was a center which gave off a rather contradictory feeling. In the center of the light, a giant dragon was sleeping on the platform formed in the center. The light was emitted from the giant dragon's body. Beside the giant dragon, there was a smaller dragon with 4 pairs of horns on its head. Interestingly, apart from the size and number of horns, the smaller dragon was exactly the same as the giant dragon. The little dragon was casually walking around the giant dragon, but it never left the giant dragon's surroundings. It just kept walking like this. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the eyes of the smaller dragon did not have any consciousness. Although it was walking freely, it gave off the feeling of a puppet. After an unknown period of time, the smaller dragon was still walking around, but the giant dragon woke up from its deep sleep. Wu-Ming slowly opened his eyes, and an unknown aura spread in all directions as Wu-Ming opened his eyes. It was the coercion that belonged to the origin dragon. If there were fantasy breeds around at this moment, they would be immediately suppressed by Wu-Ming's coercion. After sensing the natural release of power, Wu-Ming shook his head slightly. I lost my dragon's coercion, but I gained a higher level of coercion. Wu-Ming slowly propped up his body and opened his huge dragon mouth. Roar! A roar that was different from a dragon's but louder than a dragon's echoed throughout the entire source. Then, as though a bright lamp had been placed in the chaos, the entire source was instantly covered by the light emitted from Wu-Ming's body. Master, are you awake? At that moment, a voice came from the top of the smaller dragon's head. At that moment, the smaller dragon's body was no longer moving. Instead, it stopped steadily beside Wu-Ming like a standby machine. Collis, it's been hard on you. Wu-Ming supported his upper body and stretched. His huge dragon head looked at the small dragon that looked exactly the same as him. To be precise, he was looking at the top of the smaller dragon's head. There's no such thing, Master. Although a lot of time may have passed on your side, only a short while has passed on Collis's side. While speaking, the smaller dragon's pair of dragon horns suddenly detached from its head. Then, the dragon horns grew larger and merged with Wu Ming's head, turning him into a giant dragon with 4 horns. Oh, could it be that you've used my body to adjust the time of the root of everything? The crimson eyes were filled with surprise. Wu Ming had no choice but to create this small dragon because Wu Ming's main body had to guard this place to prevent a sneak attack. If Wu Ming wanted to go out, he had to use this backup body. However, this backup body was created by Wu Ming using his own flesh and blood, as well as other materials as well as origin energy. In that case, it was not strange that this body had Wu Ming's main body's abilities. However, Wu Ming had never done much research on this body, so it was only used as a backup body when Wu Ming went out. But now, it seemed that this backup body's abilities had been developed by Kalas. She could actually adjust the time difference between the outside world and the source. "Master, please punish me," Kalas said in a low voice. Wu Ming naturally knew what Kalas was referring to. She had developed his backup body without his permission. Like a paranoid person, he would definitely suspect that Kalas was trying to replace Wu Ming. After all, apart from combat strength and adaptability to time and space, Wu Ming's backup body was no different from Wu Ming's main body. In other words, it was not impossible for Kalas to use Wu Ming's backup body to betray Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming did not think so. Putting aside the fact that Kalas was destined to be unable to rebel against him, Wu Ming believed that Kalas would not betray him. Time had proven that the bond between Wu Ming and Kalas was unbreakable. Although Kalas was a magic costume, Wu Ming did not treat her as a magic costume. Instead, he treated her as a friend, partner, or subordinate. In short, she was someone he could trust. "Why would I punish you, Kalas? I can't thank you enough." Wu Ming shook his head. "Xiao En is stubborn. If I don't take the initiative to talk to her, she will treat herself as a weapon. As for you, you often take the initiative to talk to me. You even protect me when I use my servant's body to go out. Why would I punish someone like you?" Wu Ming extended his dragon claw and touched Kalas. "You're too kind, master. This is what I should do," Dragon Horn said softly. However, he felt that Kalas was enjoying it. After hearing Wu Ming's words, the chain seemed to be dissatisfied with Wu Ming's words. It resisted slightly and gently knocked on Wu Ming's body. However, to Wu Ming, it was simply acting coquettishly. After comforting Enkidu, Wu Ming continued. "Besides, you helped me develop this body's ability. I can't be happier. Why would I punish you? If this body could be like Wu Ming, then it could replace Wu Ming to guard the house and Wu Ming's body could go out. Who doesn't want to use their original body? Who wants to use a fake body every day? Then, the next time I go out with my original body, Kalas will come with me," Wu Ming suddenly said. "Thank you, master." Although Kalas was a magic costume, she also had her own thoughts. She could see that Wu Ming wanted to make up for the loneliness in her heart. "After all, you are not my slave. Don't talk about letting you stay here every day. If it were me, I would be bored to death." Wu Ming's dragon face showed a helpless expression. Wu Ming believed that Kalas was too lonely. That was why she worked so hard to develop this body, which diverged the time between the origin and the outside world. This way, she would be able to see Wu Ming soon and wouldn't have to wait for a long time. Although Wu Ming didn't think it would be a long time. After all, Wu Ming only spent a few days or so to go out of the singularity with the body of a servant. However, for Kalas, even if she didn't see Wu Ming for a day, she would still be lonely. She was a sentient tool that was determined to have a master when she was just born. After she gained the master's favor and decided to serve the master forever, she realized that the master would leave her side every few days. Even if she had a lot of knowledge and experience, after losing the master that she could rely on, Kalas, who was actually less than a year old, couldn't accept it. Even if it was just for a short period of time. With that thought in mind, Kalas successfully controlled Wu Ming's spare body and developed the ability to control the internal of the origin. Simply put, it turned from an ordinary robot in the lab into a central controller. "Then, let me test the performance of this body." Saying so, Wu Ming put his claws on the spare body that was smaller than his original body. In an instant, the spare body's eyes emitted a bright light, making people feel as if they had been turned on. Chapter 562. 2 dragons, one large and one small, stood on the platform inside the origin. The small dragon was moving about while the large dragon stood silently on the platform. Wu Ming's consciousness was still in his main body. The small dragon could move about because it was under Wu Ming's control. After all, the small dragon could be considered as Wu Ming's clone. With his spirit power rapidly developing, Wu Ming could already separate a sliver of consciousness from his main body and enter this body. Roar! The small dragon let out a furious roar. In an instant, the primal chaos around him rippled and several transparent spheres appeared. On each ball there were constantly changing images. These spheres represented every world that Wu Ming had been to. The small dragon pointed with its finger. One of the spheres floated over and arrived before the large dragon. Upon closer inspection, the image on the sphere was of some elementary school students in class. Has Meiyu already started school? She should be in the 6th grade now. Has it been so long? Wu Ming sighed. I clearly said that I would return soon. I can only say that I didn't expect the enemy to be so difficult to deal with. Wu Ming looked at Meiyu, who was listening attentively in class with nostalgia. Ripples appeared in his eyes as if he was reminiscing about his past experiences with Meiyu. Coming back to his senses, Wu Ming looked to the side. He saw the sleeping Ilya and Chloe, who was trying to tease Ilya. These two little fellows. Wu Ming shook his head with a smile. Fortunately, I have the means to control the passage of time. I was afraid that Meiyu would have become adults by the time I returned. As Wu Ming spoke, the small dragon pointed with its finger again. The sphere that represented Meiyu's world fluctuated slightly. This way, the passage of time in Meiyu's world will be extremely slow compared to other worlds. This way, Wu Ming would be able to return before Meiyu's 6th grade winter break and fulfill his promise with Meiyu. Then, Wu Ming controlled the small giant dragon to bring the balls of the other worlds that Wu Ming had been to before to Wu Ming. Wu Ming looked at the world of the god slayers, paying attention to the daily lives of his god of disobedience's minions and his beautiful female knights, and then felt a little helpless. As expected, the gods of disobedience are indeed the gods of disobedience. They seem to have settled down, but they still caused a lot of trouble, and Wu Ming switched to an image on the ball. The person on it was Wu Ming's authoritative spirit bead, Neza. Basically, it's this guy who leads them, Wu Ming said with a gloomy expression. In the world of the god slayer, Neza, who was about to go to Italy to steal the sword of the King of Swords, Salvatore Toni, suddenly felt a chill on his back. After looking around cautiously, Neza decided not to go in. From the looks of it, Wu Ming was very lazy. It could be said that if it was not for the nameless spellbook, Wu Ming would have even recorded the methods of using magic in Kala's database. Kala had not only complained about Wu Ming's laziness, but Wu Ming had always brushed her off with the same answer. After all, it's very hard on me. With Kalas here, I don't have to work so hard to remember things. Would Kalas leave me? Then these words made Kalas feel insulted, and Kalas furiously retorted. How could that be? I'll always follow Master until eternity. And then there was no and then. Then let's go together, my Kalas. Yes, my master, my lord. Then there was only a small dragon left in the major source. However, judging from the dangerous glint in its eyes from time to time, this place was not without threats even after Wu Ming left. At the very least, it could be seen from the fact that the black mud outside the root did not have the guts to enter after Wu Ming left. Chapter 563. Outside the M-shaped moon world, an ancient and noble temple that occupied a huge area was located in the void. This was a place located outside of time and space. Its name was the Crown Time Temple. Although it was a temple, it was an open-air venue. If someone stood anywhere in this temple, they only needed to raise their head to see the mysterious scene of the endless universe. On a platform located at the highest point of the innermost part of the temple, a throne comparable to the giant stone throne on the 10th floor of Nazalek was located there. On this throne, there was a man with one hand supporting his chin and the other on his abdomen. He was taking a nap with his eyes closed. Suddenly the man spoke. Did Floros fail? The man who suddenly spoke seemed to be talking to someone. It was as if he was talking to himself. It doesn't matter. I already guessed the result. Even if you have my power, it's not realistic to deal with him. As he spoke, the man opened his eyes. His scarlet pupils seemed to contain supreme wisdom, but his eyes made people feel cold. I feel it. He's coming. As he spoke, the man looked up at the void. I didn't want to attack you so soon, Origin Dragon. I still want to see Chaldea struggle. But since you're looking for death, don't blame me. As he spoke, the man's face began to turn ferocious. His eyes turned blood red and the corners of his mouth cracked to his ears. Let my Temple of Time deal with you. On the other side, A huge white dragon was swimming in the void like the universe. Its ruby-like dragon eyes were looking around. It's almost there. Now, even without the black mud imprint, I can feel that incomparably hostile power. Although he didn't know why, Wu-Ming now knew that he could completely sense the gathering place of those natural enemies. Then Wu-Ming saw the huge aperture that belonged to the M-shaped moon world and the throne of the temple embedded in the void above the aperture. It's really the periphery of the M-shaped moon world. Wu-Ming had an expression of "I knew it." Every world was fixed in a certain place in the void. Although the M-shaped moon world had countless parallel worlds, they were all in the same place. If one entered the huge aperture directly, one would immediately enter a parallel world. And if one wanted to enter a specific parallel world or a certain point in time or even a singularity, one would need to use the spacetime tunnel. Wu-Ming used the spacetime tunnel previously, but Wu-Ming didn't find any additional singularities. Then Wu-Ming laughed self-deprecatingly. The other party had the power of the origin, so how could he still exist in a singularity? Wu-Ming understood that the person he was looking for couldn't be bound by time and space, so he must be in the void of the various worlds that wasn't affected by time and space. Without any hesitation, Wu-Ming flew straight to the temple. Just as he entered the temple, Wu-Ming felt hostility and realized that something wanted to attack him. An indescribable voice sounded. Then countless tentacles attacked Wu-Ming. No, they weren't tentacles. They're actually demon god pillars. Wu-Ming squinted his huge red dragon eyes and said. Wu-Ming also thought that these were tentacles at first. Although demon god pillars could use tentacles, the tentacles of demon god pillars were spiral-shaped pieces of flesh. However, the tentacles that were attacking them were full of eyes. Taking a closer look, these were clearly demon god pillars. It was just that Wu-Ming's body had become a lot bigger, so when he looked at the demon god pillars, they looked like small tentacles. Thinking about it, it's just tentacles. They're useless against my servant body, so how could they be useful against my main body? Wu-Ming shook his head. However, could the demon god pillars themselves be enough to deal with Wu-Ming's main body? The answer was naturally no. Roar. It was clearly the void, but Wu-Ming's roar reverberated in the void. After hearing Wu-Ming's roar, the demon god pillars suddenly stopped, but they didn't stop. If one looked carefully, the demon god pillars' movements would become awkward. These low-level creatures were frightened by the pressure of Wu-Ming, a high-level creature. Sure enough, you're worthy of being that guy's subordinates. But I didn't expect to subdue you with just a roar. After saying that, Wu-Ming didn't stop and continued to fly forward. Immediately, Wu-Ming's body emitted light, like a lamp in the darkness. The light instantly covered the demon god pillars. Then, faint golden lightning appeared in the light. In terms of attack, this move didn't seem to cause any damage. Instead, the demon god pillars felt a warm feeling. However, Wu-Ming's attack was naturally not that simple. The intense light made it impossible to see the demon god pillars covered by the light. Then the light suddenly erupted with golden lightning. After a few breaths, Wu-Ming withdrew the light, and the demon god pillars that were originally covered by the light were nowhere to be seen. The power of the Blade of Salvation isn't something that a mere demon god pillar can block, Wu-Ming said indifferently, not taking the demon god pillar's destruction to heart. Then Wu-Ming continued to fly to the platform of the temple where the throne was located. As for the other demon god pillars, it was unknown whether they were afraid or under someone's orders. In short, they didn't touch Wu-Ming anymore. Or rather, they didn't seek their own deaths. Wu-Ming flew to the platform that was so wide that it was unseemly, and slowly descended. Dragon of Origin, have you come? Are you ready to accept your death? The man from before was still sitting on his throne with one hand supporting his chin, emitting the aura of a king. His originally ferocious face had now returned to a harmless look. After all, I don't think it's appropriate to leave you behind the scenes. As expected, it's better to get rid of you now. Wu-Ming said casually, as if getting rid of the man on the throne was like squashing an ant. You don't have to talk nonsense with me. Dragon of Origin, if you've grown up, I might be afraid. But the current you isn't enough for me to take you seriously. The man's words were filled with arrogance. Although Wu-Ming was very displeased, it made Wu-Ming smile inside. No matter when, arrogance was a great taboo. Facing the arrogant man, Wu-Ming thought he had already won half the battle. Speaking of which, I thought you were at a singularity. I didn't expect you to be in the void outside the world. Wu-Ming didn't continue the topic from before and instead talked about this place. Originally, Wu-Ming thought that the other party's base was also a singularity. After all, it was burned on Earth, and the temple that had no foothold could only create a singularity to be independent. As mentioned before, Wu-Ming thought so and entered the space-time tunnel. In the end, he didn't find a singularity. Therefore, Wu-Ming directly came to the void. Relying on the Dragon of Origin's natural characteristic of flying freely in the void, Wu-Ming came to the vicinity of the M-shaped moon. In the end, Wu-Ming really did find it. It could be said that the current Temple of Time was no longer a singularity, but an existence that was truly attached to the void. If it was allowed to develop, it might even become an independent world. That was indeed the case. But one day the black mud accidentally came to my temple. The man didn't mind Wu-Ming changing the topic. Instead, he enthusiastically answered Wu-Ming's question. Although Wu-Ming already knew. The man suddenly stretched out his hand, and a mass of black substance appeared in his hand. After Wu-Ming saw the black mud, he immediately felt uncomfortable. The feeling of a natural enemy surged in his heart. To be honest, if it was me in the past, I might have been affected by these things. However, from what I see now, these black mud are completely increasing my strength. As he spoke, the man stood up. My Temple of Time can be separated from the singularity and become independent of the world. It's all thanks to the power of Origin, Dragon of Origin. The man laughed loudly and his face was full of devastation. That being said, you haven't fully grasped the power of Origin, have you? King Solomon's faker, or rather, it would be better to call you Gidia. Wu-Ming's words made the man frown and he was stunned. Chapter 564. That's right, I am Gidia, commander of the 72 Demon God Pillars Amalgamation, Demon God King Gidia. Saying that, the man's outer appearance ignited and immediately the man's appearance changed completely. He was humanoid but much taller than an ordinary person as well as strangely thick forelimbs. A hole appeared in the center of Gidia's chest, and a purple eye-like orb was embedded in the hole, making people shiver. Blood-like veined patterns didn't seem to have been adjusted, but actually covered Gidia's body in an orderly fashion, connecting to the orb in front of Gidia's chest. He couldn't be called human, but had a bald head that looked like a human. On his head grew 2 antlers but more like tree branches. This was the demon god King Gaia. It was different from Solomon's monster, demon god King Gaia. As expected, you are King Solomon's creation. Wu-Ming's draconic eyes narrowed. There's nothing strange about that. Although I'm Solomon's creation after King Solomon's death, there's nothing strange about me occupying Solomon's body. It could be said that the 72 demon god pillars came from Solomon's magic grimoire Raymond Gayton, also known as Gidia. And after King Solomon's death, the name of the collective that was formed in King Solomon's body was very easy to guess. It was Gaia. The awakened Gidia could be said to be Solomon. After all, Solomon and Gidia were both characters who commanded the 72 demon god pillars, so it wasn't strange for Gidia to occupy the dead Solomon's body. But you really surprised me, Origin Dragon. The man, no, demon god King Gidia raised his head, looking at Wu-Ming's draconic head. Even the taller Gidia wasn't as large as Wu-Ming's original body. Wu-Ming was still looking down on Gidia. Then, are you surprised that I know you haven't completely grasped your origin power, or are you surprised that I know your identity? Wu-Ming said with incomparable calmness. He was not frightened by Gaia's appearance that was neither human nor ghost at all. After all, he had seen too many dirty things and had gotten used to it. I have both, Gaia smiled and continued. Indeed. Although I've obtained the power of the Black Origin soil and used it to move my temple from the singularity to the void, that's all there is to it. In fact, I'm worse than you described. I don't actually control the power of the Black Origin soil at all, and I'm only relying on the byproduct of controlling the Black Origin soil. As if he had embarrassed himself, Gidia put the Black Origin soil back into his body. To be able to guess that I haven't fully grasped the power of Origin, it's probably because I've never invaded another world. In response to Gidia's words, Wu-Ming nodded. That's right. After all, I'm in the real Origin which is connected to other worlds. I can still do a simple check on your situation, Wu-Ming said calmly. As mentioned before, the Origin was like a control panel, and Wu-Ming was the key to the control panel. Wu-Ming, who had gradually grown by absorbing the power of the Origin from the Origin, gradually unlocked the power of the control panel. For example, he could use the time of the worlds that Wu-Ming had visited as well as a simple check on Gidia's situation. However, that was all there was to it. The current Wu-Ming didn't have the power to destroy a world with a flick of his finger. Otherwise, Gideon wouldn't have looked down on Wu Ming so much. After all, if Wu Ming had that kind of power, Wu Ming would have eliminated Gideon, who stole the power of origin. If Wu Ming wanted to possess that kind of power, he would have to grow into an adult to obtain that kind of power. Gideon knew a bit about the origin dragon through the origin black mud, so Gideon wasn't worried about Wu Ming doing anything to him. A certain person was entrusted with a treasure comparable to a nation, but because they were too young, that person couldn't open the key to the treasure, and who knew how long it would take for that person to obtain the key. As a result, some people with ulterior motives would definitely play tricks and wouldn't care about that person's thoughts. Gideon was such a person. By the time Wu Ming grew up, Gideon would have achieved his goal. Then, how did you know that I wasn't Solomon? Gideon asked. It could be said that Gideon only cared about and was surprised by this matter. In my impression, you have never seen Solomon, and your knowledge of him is only from historical records. How can you say my real identity so accurately? Then Gideon shook his head. Don't say that because Raymond Gayton is called Gideon, you guessed that I was the one who occupied King Solomon's body. That would be too degrading. This made Wu Ming stunned for a moment. He was indeed going to say that. Oh, then make a guess, Gideon. Wu Ming looked at Gideon jokingly. Then, after Gideon thought for a few seconds, he gave Wu Ming an answer. I think the biggest possibility is that you met our king, Solomon, without me knowing. That's the case. Wu Ming smiled. Although Wu Ming's face was smiling, Wu Ming's heart was as if he was facing a great enemy. Gideon's IQ is inexplicably online. Those so-called great villains without IQ seem to be lying. I just saw the real King Solomon, so I knew you were fake. Based on this, I inferred your identity as Gideon. Sure enough. Gideon nodded slightly. Then, I don't know if you can see my other identity, the Dragon of Origin. This time, it was Gideon's turn to let Wu Ming guess. You don't need to tell me, I will do the same, the first beast. Wu Ming revealed Gideon's other identity. One of the 7 great human evils, the beast with the principle of mercy, Beast Eye. Wu Ming had already seen through Gideon's identity through the power of origin, when Gideon appeared. Even if Gideon had the origin black soil on him, Wu Ming could still see through it as easily as if he saw through Fufu's identity as the 4th beast. Or rather, it was because of the origin black soil on Gideon's body that it made it easier for Wu Ming to see through Gideon's identity as the 1st beast. It seems that I really underestimated you, Dragon of Origin. Then Gideon raised one of his hands. In front of my great cause, you are really an eyesore. As Gideon spoke, Wu Ming's muscles tightened. Then you will die here, Dragon of Origin. In an instant, countless black flames shot out from Gideon's hand toward Wu Ming like a machine gun. Roar! Wu Ming let out a furious roar, flapped his huge dragon wings, and dodged the black flames in an extremely unscientific manner. That's what I had in mind. You can leave here today, Gideon. Wu Ming, who had flown into the sky above the lookout, opened his mouth abruptly, and a pale golden flame shot out like a high-pressure water gun, shooting towards Gaia like a tooth for a tooth. Good timing. Gideon yelled and waved his hands. A pure energy barrier appeared before Gideon and blocked Wu Ming's origin, dragon breath. This was the first official confrontation between the young dragon of origin, Wu Ming, and the deity warden king, Gideon, who had obtained the origin black soil. It could be said that whether it was Gideon's black flames or Wu Ming's origin dragon breath, ordinary servants couldn't resist them at all. If they were ordinary people, they would have been burned to ashes before coming into contact with them, just like ordinary humans approaching the sun. However, for the two of them who could be said to be superior in terms of status and strength, those were just ordinary attacks. Gideon never thought that his black flames could kill or even injure Wu Ming, and Wu Ming was naturally not naive enough to think that his ordinary dragon breath could burn Gideon to death. All of this was just the first confrontation. The real battle had only just begun. Chapter 565. Boom. Like a nuclear explosion, a loud sound reverberated through the entire temple. Thick smoke rose from the depths of the temple. The 72 demon god pillars appeared in various parts of the large temple, all of them staring at the depths of the temple. Swish. A white, holy figure suddenly flew out from the depths of the temple. Even with the countless eyes of the demon god pillars, they were unable to see this figure clearly. They could only hear the sound of something breaking through the air. Then, following closely behind the white figure, a black figure suddenly rushed out. This time, the demon god pillars saw clearly that it was their king, the leader of the 72 demon god pillars, the demon god King Gidia. Then there was no need to guess who the white figure was. It was definitely the dragon of origin that dared to boldly fly into the depths of the temple to look for trouble with their king. In the eyes of the demon god pillars, the dragon of origin was being beaten back by their king, and was even being exterminated by their king. As a result, the demon god pillars began to dance wildly. Their huge tentacles constantly swayed as they rejoiced at the strength of their king. However, Gidia didn't pay attention to the situation of the demon god pillars. Instead, he focused on dealing with Wu Ming. Even though Gidia was chasing after Wu Ming, it was actually just Wu Ming deliberately shifting the battlefield. It wasn't that Gidia couldn't catch up to Wu Ming, but that he also wanted to shift the battlefield. If the demon god pillars entered the depths of the temple where Gidia was, they would discover that the depths of the temple had already been destroyed beyond recognition. As a formation similar to a battlefield, the Temple of Time could assist Gidia in dealing with the enemy. Moreover, because it was King Solomon's second precious artifact, it could be said to be relatively sturdy. There was basically no need to worry about it being destroyed. It could completely act as a battlefield. However, if the enemy was Wu Ming, it wouldn't work at all. As mentioned earlier, Gidia, who had obtained the black soil of origin, wasn't afraid of Wu Ming at all. However, before obtaining the black soil of origin, Gidia was still rather fearful of Wu Ming. The reason why the dragon of origin was called the dragon of origin was because it was born from the origin. Its body was extremely resistant to magic, and its defense against physical attacks wasn't weak either. This allowed the origin dragon to deal with its enemies with brute force. The Temple of Time was dragged out by Gidia through the black origin mud from the void where the singularity was formed. It was not strengthened because Gidia simply used the black origin mud to enhance his own strength. The Time Shrine itself was an A-grade relic. It was a relic of its own. It could be said that even Gilgamesh's parochial sword could destroy this noble artifact, so could it support Wu Ming in Gaia's battle here? Naturally, the answer was no. Moreover, Gidia wouldn't be so arrogant as to divert his attention to protect his noble artifact in the face of an origin dragon. As a result, the Temple of Time couldn't withstand the attacks of Wu Ming and Gidia, who had obtained the origin black soil. This was Gidia's seat. If possible, Gidia did not want to fight there. Wu Ming was also disgusted by the temple's support for Gidia. Therefore, Wu Ming and Gidia willingly left the Temple of Time and went outside. However, the reason Gidia followed behind Wu Ming wasn't because he was acting, but because he really couldn't catch up with Wu Ming. The black origin mud attached to Gidia and increased Gidia's various attributes. Even Gidia's D-grade agility was upgraded to A-grade. However, Wu Ming had 12 clones. As soon as the Phoenix form was activated, the ability to be related to time directly prevented Gidia from catching up with Wu Ming. If one were to look at the data, Wu Ming, who had been in the origin dragon for a long time and absorbed a large amount of origin dragon as power, all of his attributes were EX, which meant that he was unpredictable. However, Wu Ming didn't think that he could shake off Gidia by relying on his speed alone, so Wu Ming chose to use the Phoenix form. Wu Ming was very strong, but in the face of the black soil, which was his natural enemy, Wu Ming still felt that he was weak. Especially when the enemy was a monster like Gidia, who had obtained the origin black soil. Even if Wu Ming dared to fight Gidia head-on, he was still very cautious. He left the Temple of Time because Wu Ming was cautious, which was why he did so. However, since he had left the enemy's position, he could start again. After leaving the Temple of Time and flying into the void, Wu Ming suddenly turned around and whipped his huge and powerful tail at Gidia. Gidia naturally wasn't afraid. His thick fist mixed with black flames, he punched Wu Ming's tail. Boom! Wu Ming's tail was sent flying high into the air. At the same time, Wu Ming's head launched a platinum dragon breath at Gidia. Gidia, who had been burned, hurriedly retreated and left Wu Ming's attack range. After that, Wu Ming and Gidia stared at each other from a distance, neither moving. The situation became a standoff between the two of them. Wu Ming swayed his tail gently. On his white tail there were black marks where Gidia had hit it. Those were the marks left behind by Gidia's black soil flame. In addition, there were many black marks on Wu Ming's body, and they were the kind that went deep into his bones. Not only that, but a lot of Wu Ming's dragon scales had also been shattered by Gidia's attack. Although Wu Ming's body was in a sorry state, Gidia wasn't bad either. With that, Wu Ming directly roared and a fireball appeared from Wu Ming's mouth. It was Wu Ming's sun incarnation. Immediately afterward, the fireball became so huge that it was large enough to cover Gidia. Then Wu-Ming suddenly pushed the fireball at Gidia at an extremely fast speed. "Don't think that you can defeat me just because you have some tricks, Dragon of Origin." After saying that, Gidia spread open his arms, and in an instant, a large light wheel appeared behind him. The large light wheel gathered power in an instant, and then a purple-black beam of light blasted at Wu-Ming. Boom! The battle was still ongoing. Chapter 566. Inside the Root of Origin, Wu-Ming's backup machine, which was lying on the platform and taking a nap, suddenly woke up. Wu-Ming shifted his consciousness to the backup machine. Gidia actually attracted the other Black Origin mud that was wandering in the void, and then self-destructed. Wu-Ming recalled what had happened with a gloomy expression. After Wu-Ming and Gidia left the Time God's temple, they first used the Sun Incarnation to clash with Gidia's third relic, causing a violent explosion. If the Demon God Pillars had not combined their powers to form a defense, they and the Time God's temple would have been destroyed by Wu-Ming and Gidia's attacks. The Time God's temple was saved, although it was still in a shattered state. The 72 Demon God Pillars were also almost destroyed. Although they had been revived, they were still heavily injured. Then Wu-Ming directly returned to his human form, and used the power of the 12 incarnations and the Divine Blade of Salvation to fight Gidia to a standstill. However, overall Wu-Ming had the upper hand. However, Gidia was someone who had lived for thousands of years. The Black Origin mud that he possessed could not hurt Wu-Ming, so he used the Black Origin mud that was scattered in the void to trap Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming was almost trapped in the Black Origin mud that Gidia had gathered. The Black Origin mud was a substance without a consciousness. It was also because of this that Wu-Ming was not afraid of the Black Origin mud. Wu-Ming was most afraid of people using the Black Origin mud against him. The Black Origin mud was like a gun. Wu-Ming was an ordinary person, and an ordinary person would not be afraid of an inanimate object. However, if someone picked up a gun and fired at Wu-Ming, Wu-Ming's life would be in danger. The 12 incarnations and the Divine Blade of Salvation were Wu-Ming's guns. With a gun, Wu-Ming could fight back against the person who used a gun against him. That's right, because Wu-Ming and the Black Origin mud countered each other, they were basically two berserkers. However, there was a limit to how well they countered each other. Gidia had gathered almost all the Black Origin mud in the void. Wu-Ming in his human form was like a lone boat in the sea. It could be said that if it were not for the 12 incarnations and the Divine Blade of Salvation, Wu-Ming would have died in the Black Origin mud tide. If Silent Wonder was subdued by the Black Origin soil, Gaia would not mind killing him. From Wu-Ming's current situation, it could be seen that Wu-Ming's outcome was still not good. When Gaia saw that Wu-Ming was about to escape from the Origin Black Soil's encirclement, he made a bold decision. He directly let the Black Origin mud self-destruct. For example, in a sealed secret room, an ordinary person was holding a pesticide and killing insects. However, because he really couldn't touch the insects, he directly tore apart the pesticide sprayer violently and sprayed the pesticide everywhere in the secret room. In this way the insects were finished. But it should be known that pesticides were also harmful to the human body. Kill 1,000 enemies but lose 800 of your own. Wu-Ming's body disappeared in the explosion of the Black Origin mud, and Gidia was also injured by the self-destruction of the Black Origin mud. Wu-Ming could guess what Gidia was thinking. The current Wu-Ming was quite difficult to deal with. After letting him go, there was no guarantee that Wu-Ming would not become stronger again. It could only be said that Gidia was worthy of his reputation. He didn't even think about it, or it could be said that he directly detonated the Black Origin mud after careful consideration. As a result, Wu-Ming's body disappeared, Gidia was injured, and the Black Origin mud was almost completely destroyed. Wu-Ming, who had temporarily transferred his consciousness, knew that his body didn't die, but was injured more severely than Gidia, and had been blasted to some unknown world. For example, could you imagine someone detonating the Earth to kill an ordinary person? It could be said that if Wu-Ming hadn't been soaking in the Black Origin for a long time to absorb its power to evolve, he would probably have died. No, it should be said that even Wu-Ming would have died in such a situation when he was fighting Artesius. It seems that the Black Origin is really a hotbed for me. Wu-Ming was a little regretful. He should have soaked in the Black Origin for a while before looking for Gidia. At the very least, he wouldn't have been forced to transfer his consciousness because of the Black Origin mud's explosion. Wu-Ming had transferred his consciousness because the Black Origin mud's self-destruction didn't just target his body, but also his mind. Physical damage could be recovered, but if his mind collapsed it would basically be over. Fortunately, Gidia helped me solve part of the problem. Gidia had gathered almost all of the Black Origin mud in the void of various worlds and detonated them. It could be said that Wuming no longer had to worry about the Black Origin mud in the void. However, the Black Origin mud didn't only exist in the void. According to Wuming's experience, Wuming already knew that a lot of Black Origin mud had entered various worlds. Moreover, there was no guarantee that Gidia wouldn't mass-produce the Black Origin mud himself. Wuming guessed that the reason the Black Origin mud was endless was because of its asexual reproduction ability. Wuming didn't believe that such a large amount of Black Origin mud really came from the Black Origin. The most important evidence was the image Wuming saw when he came into contact with the Black Origin mud mark. The amount of Black Origin mud that left the Black Origin mud from the Black Origin wasn't as much as what Gidia had detonated. The Black Origin mud only appeared after Wuming was sent away from the Black Origin. And Wuming knew his own situation. He didn't stay in the Black Origin world for long before he was sent to another world to grow. What a headache. Wuming reached out his dragon claw and rubbed his head. This was great. Kalis and Enkidu were both on Wuming's main body, and the two of them disappeared with Wuming's main body. However, no matter what, Gidia didn't have the ability to play any tricks now. The self-destruction of the Black Origin mud was enough for him to deal with. I have to find my main body as soon as possible. It's hard to calculate the time. After all, the flow of time in the world that Wuming's main body entered might be different from the Black Origin world. The self-destruction of the Black Origin mud just now had temporarily disrupted Wuming's control of the Black Origin world. It would take some time before Wuming could find out where his main body was through the Black Origin world. And Wuming's current main body couldn't leave the Black Origin world. Who knew if there were any fish that slipped through the net in the void? If the Black Origin mud invaded, Wuming would have nowhere to cry. Sigh, looks like I can only wait. Wuming lay down on the platform and started to rest. Although Wuming had shifted his consciousness in time, Wuming's consciousness was still greatly affected. Now Wuming felt like his head had been run over by a truck. It's hard to imagine what would happen to me if I was completely injured by the self-destruction of the Black Origin mud. If he was slightly affected, it would be like being run over by a truck. If he was completely injured, he would probably have a mental breakdown. At this moment, a letter suddenly fell from the Black Origin world to Wuming's head. A letter? This gave Wuming a fright. Wuming didn't have any malicious intent in this letter. In the Black Origin world, Wuming was half invincible. He could still detect the danger of a letter. In other words, this was a harmless letter. Then Wuming used his telekinesis to pick up the letter that fell on his head. There was nothing else on the snow-white envelope except for the red ink on the back, which was used to ensure that the letter was sealed. It looked like a simple and plain letter that couldn't be any more simple. However, Wuming narrowed his eyes and started to think about the problem. The Black Origin world wasn't a place that anyone could enter. Now that Wuming was guarding the Black Origin world, not just anyone could enter. Unless Wuming agreed to it. Wuming looked at the letter and suddenly thought of a possibility. But before opening the letter, Wuming gathered his power and created a servant's spiritual base. This was in preparation for him to help Gadatsi at the next singularity. Then Wuming opened the letter. Chapter 567. Above a large lake near the outer gate of Eastern District 2105380 in the Box Court world. All of a sudden, 4 figures, 2 men and 2 women, appeared 10,000 meters above the ground. Since they could not let Newton faint from crying in the toilet, the 4 figures were falling vertically due to gravity. Wuming opened his eyes, but when he noticed his current state, he did not do anything. Instead, he was thinking deeply about what had happened. On the platform inside the Root of Origin, Wuming opened the letter after creating a spiritual base. Immediately after that, Wuming felt that the letter was pulling him as if it was taking him somewhere. But it was clear that the letter had failed. Even if it was a backup body, the body was made from the flesh of the Root of Origin dragon. How could a mere letter move Wuming? Moreover, this was inside the Root of Origin. The half-invincible Wuming could not be pulled away no matter how one thought about it. However, Wuming had a hunch. This letter is definitely a signal sent by my real body. With that in mind, Wuming decided to take a look at the world that the letter wanted to pull him into. With the automatic management of the Root of Origin, there was no need to worry about the Root of Origin being lost. However, it also meant that Wuming's backup body could not go. Therefore, Wu Ming emptied his mind and allowed the letter to pull his spirit over. That was right. Wu Ming was now a spiritual body. No, to be precise, Wu Ming was now a spirit. Wu Ming's current state could also be called a heroic spirit. The heroic spirit's clone was called a servant. Wu Ming, on the other hand, had directly materialized his spiritual body. Instead of weakening the clone, he had retained the full strength of his real body. The only difference from his real body was that Wu Ming could not transform into the root of origin dragon's gigantic dragon form. Moreover, everything about Wu Ming was a magical projection without a physical body. Whether it was his tools or relics, they were all illusory. However, those tools and relics could not be used. Therefore, at this moment, Wu Ming's spiritual body could be called a heroic spirit state. Then Wu Ming's heroic spirit state opened his eyes and appeared 10,000 meters high in the sky of this world. In short, he had arrived in an unknown world. Although Wu Ming had sorted it out in his mind, Wu Ming's doubts grew. It was his doubts about this unknown world, or rather, his desire to explore the unknown world had become more burdensome. After all, Wu Ming was a traveler. After thinking about it for a while, Wu Ming came back to his senses and began to look around. Then he discovered his current situation. Am I in the sky? Although Wu Ming in the sky, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming, Wu Ming. Then Wu Ming looked at the remaining man and two women who were in free fall like him. The four of them were in a state of four different forms of free fall. Each of them occupied a corner. First, Wu Ming looked at the person on his left. He had short, light blonde hair and purple eyes. He was wearing a pair of headphones that looked more like headbands than listening to music. He was dressed in a dark blue high school uniform and looked like a delinquent. He had an unruly and surprised smile on his face. Wu Ming understood his smile. It was the excitement and joy of encountering an extraordinary phenomenon after losing all passion for ordinary phenomena. He looks like a problem child. Wu Ming commented in his mind. Then Wu Ming looked at the person on his right. It was a young lady with the temperament of a rich lady. Her beautiful face was frowning slightly. She had black waist-length hair and flat bangs on her forehead. The ends of her long hair on both sides of her forehead were tied into braids. Two red bows were tied on both sides of her head. She wore a pure white uniform with a yellow tie and a conservative dark blue traditional dress that reached her calves. This was also a problem child, and it was a problem child in the feudal and conservative style of a rich lady. Wu Ming commented. Finally, Wu Ming looked at the expressionless girl who was holding a cat with 3 different colors of fur. Beautiful short brown hair. She was not beautiful, but she had a delicate face like a doll. There was a silver hairpin on the side of her short hair, which added a bit of cuteness to the girl. He was wearing a white sleeveless top and orange shorts, and a sleeveless white trench coat with blue edges. Around his neck was a carving that looked like a pendant. On his feet he was wearing knee-high socks and calf-high boots. This unique combination gave people a feeling that they were dazzling, but there must be a demonic sense of evil under that face. Simply put, this was also a problem child. Wu Ming was quite troubled. Thinking about it carefully, although Wu Ming was not interested in causing trouble, Wu Ming himself was also half a problem child. I feel like I'm in trouble? Wu Ming said lightly. Then, to relax, Wu Ming looked at the scenery in the distance. As a ghost that was doing a vertical descent from a height of 10,000 meters, Wu Ming thought that the scenery here was quite good. Just kidding. In the distance, Wu Ming saw areas covered by transparent semicircles. Countless areas that looked like greenhouse bases were closely adjacent to each other, and then extended into the distance that he could not see the end of. Those transparent semicircles that looked like greenhouse sheds were some barriers. This was Wu Ming's judgment. Around the transparent sheds were a lush forest that covered a large area. The area that Wu Ming was in looked like a lush forest. All in all, this was a large area, at least much larger than Earth. However, Wu Ming was quite interested in this vast area that he could not see the end of. Even with Wu Ming's eyesight, he could not see the end, so one could imagine how big this world was. And the vastness of the world meant that there were many unknown pleasures. The reason why Wu Ming was a traveler was because of his desire to explore the unknown. However, this was not without its drawbacks. This meant that it would be very troublesome for Wu Ming to find his main body. However, seeing that he was getting closer to the ground, Wu Ming, who was about to fall, did not think about other things for the time being. Let's land safely first. As he said that, Wu Ming activated his telekinesis. In an instant, including Wu Ming, the 4 people that fell from the sky seemed to be supported by something invisible as they floated steadily to the ground. Yo, little brother, this is your method, right? It's quite interesting, isn't it? Let me thank you first. First, the delinquent young man greeted Wu Ming and thanked him after landing. It's just a small trick using my telekinesis, it's not worth mentioning. Wu Ming shook his head. Then Wu Ming looked at the giant lake beside him. Moreover, even without me, you would only fall into this lake, at least your lives would not be in danger. But in the end you still helped us, didn't you? The blond young man smiled and waved his hand indifferently. I agree with this delinquent young man, even if the original result was good, but Jiu Fei Niao was saved by you, the necessary gratitude is necessary. The lady named Jiu Fei Niao also thanked Wu Ming. Thank you. On the other hand, the girl who was hugging the cat was quite nimble. She didn't say anything and directly thanked Wu Ming. The three of them were people with strong personalities, so Wu Ming had no choice but to accept their gratitude. Then the four of them exchanged names. By the way, could it be that you guys also received that strange letter? The young man named 16 Knights asked the others with a smile. Ah, so 16th Eventide has also received that letter? Miss Jiao Fei Niao replied with her arms crossed. Same. The delicate girl named Haruhide Yayoshi nodded. Me too. Wu Ming was the same. However, Wu Ming did not feel that the letter he received was the same as the three problem children. He wanted to ask why. One word, intuition, for all asterisk. However, Wu Ming did not want to be an anomaly, he wanted to be like the three of them. Let's not talk about the letter for now. Little brother, you're not human, right? Suddenly, 16 Knights looked at Wu Ming with an arrogant smile. Chapter 568. This made Wu Ming frown. Could it be that this seemingly delinquent boy was actually hostile towards non-humans? Don't worry, it's just that your powerful aura is making my blood boil. Normal humans can't possibly make me think this way. Wu Ming then realized that 16 Knights, Jiuyuki, and Haruhibu Yao were standing a little far away from him. Sorry, I feel a little uncomfortable being close to you. This was what Jiuyuki said. I'm fine, it's just that Sanmao Cat feels uncomfortable. This was what Haruhibu Yao said. Including 16 Knights, the three of them were slightly further away from Wu Ming because of the pressure from Wu Ming's powerful aura. Wu Ming had used his spiritual form twice. The first time was when he was pulled over by Wu Ming's semi-fixed barrier, and the second time was when Wu Ming took the initiative to use it. Although the physical body was different, Wu Ming's spiritual form was the same. Because Attila was the giant god, and because Wu Ming was unfamiliar with spiritual power and had never fought with Gidia before, Wu Ming didn't put too much pressure on Attila. This time, Wu Ming's current state could be said to be the first time Wu Ming used his spiritual form on his own. In addition, he had just fought with Gidia, so the pressure didn't lose its effect because Wu Ming was a spiritual form. I'm sorry. Wu Ming smiled bitterly and retracted his pressure. I just fought with a powerful enemy, so I didn't adjust. I'm really sorry. Facing Wu Ming's apology, the two problem children accepted it as a matter of course. I, Jiuyuki, forgive you. This time we're even. Jiuyuki waved her hand. Ditto. Haruhibu Yao was still hugging the cat with a look of indifference. Only 16 Knights didn't care about Wu Ming's apology for unintentionally releasing his pressure. Instead, he was very interested in Wu Ming's pressure and the enemy that Wu Ming thought was powerful. Why are you interested? Wu Ming looked at 16 Knights with interest. Of course, little brother, do you want to spar with me? Wu Ming was silent. It wasn't because someone he just met wanted to spar with him, although it was more or less. Wu Ming was slightly surprised. Falling from a height of 10,000 meters, he didn't seem to be frightened at all. He wasn't interested in Wu Ming's telekinesis either. He didn't panic even after coming to an unknown world. More importantly, these three boys and girls, they weren't affected by Wu Ming's. That was comparable to the world or even a higher level of pressure. Wu Ming looked like an ordinary human, but the three boys and girls only subconsciously distanced themselves from Wu Ming. They didn't react to Wu Ming's pressure. Only distanced themselves from Wu Ming by a little. It was obvious that these three seemingly ordinary humans were not ordinary at all and were not simple at all. Now, if someone suddenly told Wu Ming that they were the chosen ones, which was quite ridiculous, Wu Ming would believe it. Then Wu Ming did something that would be considered a bully in the eyes of those who knew Wu Ming's abilities. Alright, let's spar. Let me see what's so special about you guys. Wu Ming thought. After hearing Wu Ming's words, 16 Knights smiled, and it was the purest kind of smile. Seeing this smile, Wu Ming was sure that this seemingly ordinary human Wu Ming wasn't as ordinary as he looked on the surface. Then, just as 16 Knights was about to tell Wu Ming what was a normal brawl, exclusive to male high school students, a rabbit suddenly jumped out. Stop. Stop. Please don't fight. Black Rabbit will be very distressed. A blue-haired girl wearing a rabbit costume as a bunny girl suddenly jumped out from the bushes. She looked at Silent and 16 Knights who were about to start fighting with each other with a troubled expression. Cosplay? It's cosplay, right? Oh, this is really pleasing to the eye. The three problem children each expressed their opinions. However, Wu Ming didn't think that this girl who seemed to be cosplaying was cosplaying because he felt the power of God from this rabbit girl. After all, Wu Ming was half a god slayer. Although he didn't bring the body of a god slayer with him, thanks to his time as a half-god slayer, Wu Ming's understanding of gods and things related to gods was still quite sensitive. Black Rabbit is not a cosplay. Black Rabbit is the noble Moon Rabbit, a nobleman. The girl named Black Rabbit shouted in exasperation, trying to prove her innocence. Moon Rabbit? Wu Ming thought thoughtfully. Wu Ming knew this word. Back in the world of the god slayers, Wu Ming read a lot of books about mythology to deal with the various gods, although Wu Ming later found it troublesome and asked Collis to save it in the database. But Wu Ming still knew a lot of myths and legends, and the story of Moon Rabbit happened to be a myth that Wu Ming knew. According to legend, Moon Rabbit jumped into the fire and sacrificed herself in order to save an old man. Then this action moved Sakura and she was taken in by Sakura. In short, Moon Rabbit was a rabbit that lived by the principle of sacrifice and dedication. Black Rabbit should be the descendant of Moon Rabbit or something like that. But what was a nobleman? Wu Ming really didn't know about this. At this time, Haruai Hibaku appeared behind Black Rabbit without anyone noticing. I'll catch it. Then Haruai Hibaku grabbed one of Black Rabbit's rabbit ears, and at the same time he also added a voice for himself. What are you doing? Why are you grabbing Black Rabbit's rabbit ears? Black Rabbit looked as if her lifeline was grabbed. She nervously grabbed Haruai Hibaku's hand that was grabbing Black Rabbit's rabbit ears with tears in her eyes. Because I want to know if you're cosplaying or not. Haruai Hibaku showed a smug expression, and then the hand that was grabbing Black Rabbit's ear pulled up slightly. Wah, please stop. Black Rabbit was about to, no, it was already about to cry. Oh, could it be that it's a real rabbit ear? Let me try to. As she said that, Milady grabbed Black Rabbit's other rabbit ear. Wah! Black Rabbit let out a mournful cry that resounded through the sky, and a group of birds flew out of the forest in fright. Don't tell me you want to pull that Moon Rabbit's ear too. Wu Ming looked at Reverse 16 Knights who was eager to try. Reverse 16 Knights smiled. I want to, but that rabbit's ear is occupied by Haruai Hibaku and Milady. Moreover, Reverse 16 Knights looked at Wu Ming with a fighting spirit. I'm more interested in fighting with you. Stop. Fighting is prohibited. Black Rabbit, who had finally broken free from Haruai Hibaku's and Jio Yuasuk's torment, suddenly came in front of Wu Ming and Reverse 16 Knights. Then Black Rabbit took out a folding fan from nowhere, and hit Reverse 16 Knights and Wu Ming on the head. You bunch of problematic adults. Neither Reverse 16 Knights nor Wu Ming dodged, and both of them were hit by Black Rabbit's folding fan. Thank you for the compliment. Reverse 16 Knights smiled at Black Rabbit. I'm not complimenting you. Reverse 16 Knights, who treated problematic child as a compliment, made Black Rabbit feel helpless. However, Wu Ming felt that Reverse 16 Knights was deliberately teasing Black Rabbit. Speaking of which, I didn't do anything, so why did you hit me? Wu Ming subconsciously rubbed the spot on his head that Black Rabbit hit. Black Rabbit did not use any force, but Wu Ming was slightly unhappy that he was dragged into this. I just agreed to Reverse 16 Knights' request. That's all. Wu Ming looked at Black Rabbit with a smile. Wu Ming would never admit that his smile at this moment was extremely mischievous. Wu Ming's words of, that's all, made Black Rabbit feel quite helpless. Do you want to fight until there are casualties before you're happy? However, Reverse 16 Knights laughed. What are you talking about, little brother? I'm the one who picked a fight and you're the one who fought back. Wu Ming, on the other hand, smiled with interest. In other words, this fight must be fought and it must be fought at this moment. Stop. Mr. Villo only agreed, I haven't made a move yet. Black Rabbit protested. However, to Reverse 16 Knights, Wu Ming's answer was the beginning of the fight. In other words, it was the so-called fight back. Looking at Reverse 16 Knights who did not listen at all, Black Rabbit's shoulders drooped. Then let's postpone this fight. Can we listen to Black Rabbit explain the box court world to everyone? This sentence made Jianghu and Haruhito Yayoi, who were ready to ambush Black Rabbit, reverse 16 knights whose eyes were already burning with desire, and Wuming, who was paying attention to Black Rabbit, all look at Black Rabbit. Seeing that the problematic child was so obedient, Black Rabbit smiled. Then, let's listen to Black Rabbit's explanation. Chapter 569. Then, after the Black Rabbit walked around in circles, it began to explain this world called Box Court World. First of all, welcome to the Box World. Black Rabbit opened her hands and closed one of her eyes playfully. With a smile on her face, she spoke a very enthusiastic opening line to Wu Ming and the other three. It feels so perfunctory. Haruhito Hikari whispered to Jianghu. Indeed. Jianghu nodded respectfully. Hey. Black Rabbit instantly collapsed again. Just kidding. 2. Because Black Rabbit was teased, its ears drooped, and it looked like it couldn't take it anymore. Seeing that it was about time, 16 Knights waved his hand. Let's cut to the chase. What exactly is this box court world? 16 Knights asked rudely. Really, Mr. 16 Knights is so rude. Black Rabbit complained. However, Wuming's next words made Black Rabbit's tail tighten. Let's not talk about whether it's rude or not. The person who was eavesdropping over there was you. As he said that, Wuming pointed to a bush. What are you talking about, Mr. Villo? Black Rabbit was just passing by for some reason. Ah. Wuming's unwavering gaze caused Black Rabbit to stop its awkward performance. Yes, I'm sorry, Black Rabbit shouldn't hide and eavesdrop, but that's all reasonable. However, Wuming directly interrupted Black Rabbit's words. Okay, I didn't want to blame you. If I guessed correctly, you should have a lot to do with us coming to this world. Wuming's words made Black Rabbit's body tremble, and its ears drooped again. Oh, little brother, you're starting to suspect this rabbit too? 16 Knights looked at Wuming with a typical delinquent smile on his face. There's no other way. Wuming spread his hands. When we were still some distance away from the ground, I released my mental power to explore the surroundings. Not to mention the area blocked by the barrier. Within the area of thousands of square meters, there are no other humanoid creatures other than the 4 of us and the Black Rabbit. Over 1,000 square meters? Juyuan Flying Bird was shocked by Wuming's spiritual perception. Not only Kyugu Asaka but Black Rabbit and Harui Biao were also shocked. Even Reverse 16 Knights, who had always been calm in the face of such a situation, was shaken. It could be seen from his increasingly excited face. I have a question. Can Avillo's psychic power spread that far? Harui Abe held the cat in one hand and raised his other hand. He looked quite cute. If I spread out in all directions with me as the center, the range can be much larger. If I only explore in one direction. Wuming closed his eyes and opened them a few seconds later to look at the local Black Rabbit. There's a spectacular waterfall in the easternmost area. There's also a snake there. If there's a chance, let's go check it out together. Could that be the world's end? Black Rabbit looked at Wuming in shock. The world's end. 3 good heavens. This made the 3 problem children excited. Although this is the closest place to the world's end, it's still tens of thousands of meters away. It seems that Mr. Villo has an extremely powerful gift. Then Black Rabbit looked at Reverse 16 Knights and the other 2 problem children who were eager to go and quickly waved his hand. You must not go there. The water god is there. The snake that Mr. Villo saw is Lord Water God. Now that you mention it, I want to go even more. Reverse 16 Knights' words almost made Black Rabbit cry again. Water god. Sounds like a god. If there's a chance, let's go check it out. Juyuan Flying Bird did not want to go immediately. However, in Black Rabbit's opinion, it was dangerous for problem children to have such thoughts. Snake? I don't hate snakes. If possible, I would like to become friends with Lord Snake, Harui Toshi said to the cat in his arms. However, this sentence sounded gentle, but in Black Rabbit's opinion, it was also quite dangerous. Problem children were all troublemakers. Speaking of which, that snake stared at me just now. Looks like I'll have to teach it a lesson. Wuming was purely having fun. Please take back your troublemaking thoughts. Black Rabbit felt that she could not do it anymore. Speaking of which, are you actually a wizard? Reverse 16 Knights looked at Wuming. Not really. Compared to a wizard, I prefer a warrior who uses his fists to his flesh, Wuming joked. Then, Is the telekinesis from before also a type of spirit power? Jiyuan Flying Bird asked. That's right. As long as the spirit power is strong enough, it is not a problem to affect the real world. Wuming nodded. Then Villo, can you use your telekinesis to make Black Rabbit stand upside down? Finally, Haruai Toshi asked the most dangerous question for Black Rabbit. Eh? Black Rabbit was stunned. Of course. As soon as Wuming finished speaking, Black Rabbit felt her body floating. No, she really floated. Then Black Rabbit, who was 1 meter above the ground, was suddenly flipped over. Ah! Black Rabbit let out a sound that a girl should have and tightly held onto her miniskirt. I'll grab it. Haruai Toshi and Jiyuan Flying Bird took the opportunity to grab the rabbit's naturally drooping ears. Ah! Please stop. What's with this miniskirt? Does it defy gravity? Reverse 16 Knights looked at the miniskirt in confusion. Even though she was flipped upside down, she still did not fall due to gravity. I'm afraid it's a special piece of clothing, Wuming said to Reverse 16 Knights. So that's how it is. This box is really amazing. 16 Knights clenched her fist and punched her other hand. Looking at Wuming and 16th Knights who seemed to be studying something important, Black Rabbit was completely enraged. You bunch of problematic children. A minute later, the 4 people, including Wuming, sat on a white cloth that Black Rabbit took out from a card. Black Rabbit, whose hair suddenly turned pink, knelt elegantly in front of the 4 people. According to Black Rabbit, her hair would only change color when her emotions changed drastically or when she was ready for battle. Needless to say, the reason why her hair changed color this time was because of Wuming and the others. Then Black Rabbit, who gradually calmed down, regained her blue hair and sighed helplessly. Really, how did Black Rabbit meet such a group of problematic adults? It must be said that Black Rabbit was indeed a descendant of the Moon Rabbit clan. But in terms of dedication and sacrifice, Wuming felt that she was already qualified. Being teased by the people she just met, constantly grabbing her rabbit ears, and being turned upside down. It could be said that she almost lost her virginity. Anyone would be furious. Although Black Rabbit was also angry, she only pretended to be angry and then lectured Wuming and the others. Wuming simply knew that he could not make too much of a fuss, so he went along with Black Rabbit's idea. But as for the remaining 3 problematic children, Black Rabbit's hair can change color. How interesting. Jiyuan Fei looked at Black Rabbit's hair covetously. It is indeed interesting. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded and stroked his cat, as if he was considering whether his cat could change color. However, the cat did not give him face and shook its cat head in a very human-like manner. Stop, Black Rabbit. Don't play with Black Rabbit's hair anymore. Black Rabbit said helplessly. Black Rabbit's ears too. Seeing that the 2 wanted to say something, Black Rabbit quickly added. Tisk X2 stop it Black Rabbit, I heard you. Then Black Rabbit's expression became teary again. Really, a group of problematic children? Okay, it's about time to get to the main topic. Wuming interrupted the farce. At this time, Black Rabbit realized that she was going to explain the matter of Hakata to the 4 people, but she was interrupted by Wuming. In the end, it led to this series of events. In the end, if you think about it carefully, it's all the little brother's fault. 16 Knights looked at Wuming, who did not mind the trouble, and looked at Wuming with a mischievous smile. A lady will not cover for a criminal. Jiao Fei Niao flipped her hair and said calmly. However, her curved lips betrayed her. Yeah. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded fatally. Then Black Rabbit looked like she was about to cry again. It's all Mr. Villo's fault. That you're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.